process stuff started, and then hope that Bill Baber from the city of La Mesa.
No, I've been here for the last few minutes. I guess you didn't see me. Can you see me now?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I can see you now. How did I miss you?
You
You
know,
look like an NFL sports announcer.
there you go. Well, I have to because I'm with a Hall of Fame person, Eddie, on the line here. So
All right. Well, let's get this meeting started. It is January 28th, 2021, and it is 5:03. I'm going to call this meeting to order. We are still meeting remotely, virtually, because of COVID, to make sure that everybody is safe. And so thank you for tuning in today and joining our meeting. And so let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have a flag? If not, oh, we do. I didn't see it. All right, please join me in a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And can we, Megan, can we do a roll call?
Director Montgomery,
Here.
Director Dedina,
Here.
Director Baber,
Here,
Vice Chair Padilla,
Present.
Chair
Present.
Mosca. We have
All
a
right.
quorum.
Any changes to the posted agenda? Megan, do we have anybody that would, any members of the public that wish to address the body or this board, or have they sent in comments?
Yes, we have one non-agenda public comment, Jim Whalen, and he would like to speak through his computer.
Perfect.
How about that? Does that work?
There you are.
Yes,
Is
it
this
is. Good to go?
Yes, Jim,
Welcome.
please.
Yep,
All right,
we can hear
thanks.
you.
Hello, board members. My name is Jim Whalen with J. Whalen Associates. I have monitored your meetings for some time to get familiarized with things before I stuck my nose into what you're doing. But I am privileged to work on most of the large renewables projects in San Diego County. And I also have a local government role because I'm the vice chairman of the San Diego Planning Commission. What I wanted to talk about just real quick is I want to offer my assistance to come up with a way for local projects to be cost competitive. I've been working with Cody and Bill, and we're waiting for the new director of power services to start. And I will be, goes as we hope, we'll be meeting with some of our clients who have experience in this area, see if we can come up with a way to give you a metric to have local power be competitive with what you're getting from out of state. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I'm sure some of you at least know about this, is yesterday the Board of Supervisors made a very important vote on their climate action plan, and probably more germane to what we're talking about here, getting going on hopefully their community choice aggregation setup. And I'll stop right there if anybody has any questions, but I've been watching for probably, how long, Cody, 5 months? And I look forward to being involved productively in the future. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for those comments. And certainly this board is very focused on bringing about local generation in the future. So this is a very relevant topic, and I'm happy that you're meeting with our staff to keep that dialogue going. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's move to Megan. If there's no more members of the public that wish to address us, we're going to move to item number 1, which is the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of Board of Directors of San Diego Community Power, which was held on December 17th, 2020. Any comments, questions for staff?
I'll move the item.
All right, we have a motion by Director Baber. Do we have a second?
I will second.
All right, we have a second by Director Montgomery Stepp. Megan, do we have any public comment
We
on
do
this
not.
item? All right, so we have a motion and a second. Let's go to
Director
vote.
Montgomery, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Dedina, how do you vote?
Dina, aye.
Director Baber, how do you vote?
Yes.
Vice Chair Padilla, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Muska, how do you
Yes.
vote? Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
All right, next item on our agenda is Operations and Administration Report. And this is from Bill Carnahan, our interim executive officer.
Okay, it's actually two parts. Ty is going to do the regulatory update, but I'm going to give you a couple of items. I would have had more, but we only met 2 weeks ago, and I gave you all my ammo a couple of weeks ago. So this is only what's happened the last 10 days or so. But first of all, draw your attention to the fact that we are in the process of recruiting for 2 positions as a part of our staffing up proposal. We have a key accounts rep out on the street right now. On the street, it's actually, you go to our website and it'll take you to Encinitas' websites where the candidates can actually apply. And the second one that's coming any day now is the CFO position. And then we have a couple more lined up after that. So we're kind of doing a staged manner. But I would like to just draw your attention to the fact that if you know of anyone who might fit any of these job categories, please get them the word, have them check their website. If you know places that have posting boards or job boards, put them on there. We very, very much would like to be able to draw our workforce from the area and get good qualified people. And so the only way they know is if they hear about it, and we want to get the word spread as much as we can. So we're off and running, and tell them if they don't see one of these 2 that might fit the bill, have them keep coming back, and we'll be posting subsequent ones. So we're excited to be able to hopefully contribute back to the community as well in the way of offering positions. The second item is just to report that we're entering into what I would call a new phase of high-level meetings with SDG&E. Chair Mosca and Vice Chair Padilla and I met with the CEO at SDG&E and a couple of her assistant managers, and I think it's actually the chairman of the board, to begin discussions on how we can cooperate and operate more effectively, and in generally the areas of the billing system and making sure it meets our needs in terms of startup and of the various phases. Energy purchasing, there's actually an item kind of related to that tonight, so that we can actually start filling our portfolio with the resources that might be idled or that we're paying PCIA for, and then also on rates to try to get a heads up, which the last meeting we had, you could tell there was some confusion related to rates and what the rates were going to be, and we're trying to, as best we can, to coordinate with each other in a way that we can get a little better handle a little sooner on those efforts. So those will be ongoing. There's also a couple of staff groups working, one on billing and one on resources as well. So we're working together not only at the highest levels, but at the nearly highest levels of each organization. And so I'm optimistic that we can continue that as we go along. We'll keep you posted as we have breakthroughs in that area, but it's certainly an effort that we're willing to put forward, because if we can break those barriers that have existed for a while, we're going to be doing business with one another for forever and ever in the future. We might as well make that as productive as we can. And I don't know if the chair or vice chair had any reactions or comments of that meeting or not, but I think it's a bit of a milestone.
No, I thought, just briefly, Bill really hit on all of the things there. I think that I came away from that meeting really impressed with Carolyn Nguyen, the CEO of SDG&E. She was forthright with us. She made a commitment to communicating with us on a regular basis, and setting up work groups within both organizations, so that we're communicating on a regular basis on all the key issues from billing to rates, energy procurement, and anytime there's any kinks in there, then we should be communicating that higher up when we're meeting with her and a lot of her the senior management folks at SDG&E on a regular basis. So I came away from that meeting really positive and feeling like they wanted to work with us. So very optimistic about the relationship, and hopeful that with some of the really thorny issues that we're approaching, that we're able to communicate with them as proactively as possible. We're not always going to agree on everything. We're coming from a very different point of view and very different values. And so, but I think the key thing is to be able to communicate with each other effectively and as regularly as possible to avoid pitfalls.
Okay, that's really all I have to report. So I would turn it over to Ty to give the regulatory update.
Thank you, Mr. Carnahan. Members of the board, can I share my screen?
I think so.
It's giving me a
Kimberly,
deny
can we
message.
help Ty so he can share his screen?
And while he's doing that, I wanted to just remind the board that Laura Fernandez, I'm looking for her face on here. She's joining us as the Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs. So as she's coming up to speed, she'll start participating in these presentations. But Ty has been our go-to and will continue to be part of the team. So he's up now, and we now see your slides.
Great.
So thanks for that.
You're on.
Great, thanks for the assistance. And yeah, I do want to welcome Laura. Laura and I have actually worked together quite a bit in the past. When Laura was with the Braun Blazing law firm, we collaborated quite a bit, and so we've hit the ground running here. So I did want to update you all about a few different proceedings that we are engaged in. And I know everybody's gotten wind of the ERA forecast decision, but I did want to go through in a little bit more detail. So as you all know, the Public Utilities Commission decided the SDG&E ERA forecast application, setting rates for this year recently. And the primary issue that we were addressing there was, a methodological issue, and whether specifically whether SDG&E should be taking a departing load into account when they set their rates. They are proposing not to for various reasons, and that would have led to a dramatic rate reduction relative to their current rates. We were able to persuade the commission that SDG&E should take into account departing load, and made several arguments. And I'm happy to formally report that here at the board meeting that the commission took that decision and instructed SDG&E to take the departing load, the customers that are leaving utility service and heading to CCA service into account. So there's not going to be any drastic reduction in SDG&E rates relative to current rates. In fact, we're anticipating an increase in rates somewhere between 13 and 20%. Is what we're anticipating. We will be there receiving more information about that from SDG&E directly, and as well they will be issuing an advice letter. I think it was going to be issued today or tomorrow. So we will be looking for more details and reporting back about that. I haven't seen anything yet. So we have internally discussed this quite a bit in terms of not only the issues but lessons learned, and so I think that we did get a lot out of the experience going forward. A couple other things: the system average percent change method was adopted, so that what that means is each rate class will be adjusted equally to absorb this rate increase in this case. So that was an important thing we were also asking for. Not mentioned here in the presentation, but also important. We were able to obtain a number of other orders from the commission instructing SDG&E to disclose various data and documents in future ERA forecast proceedings. So our campaign for greater transparency is also having some success. So happy to answer any questions about that. Otherwise, I'll move on, and certainly we'll report back about the rate implementation as it moves forward.
Ty, you just mentioned just a rate impact from this. Do we know yet, and maybe we need more time, any kind of impact that would have on our customers?
The ERA is directly related to the bundled customer And so there is data that's relevant to the PCIA that does get addressed in the ERA, certainly. This would primarily relate to existing bundled customers. So no direct impact other than the PCIA rate being set on SDCP customers.
All right.
Mr. Mosca.
Thank you.
In addition to the ERA forecast proceeding, there's an ERA trigger application. Their utilities are required to file these applications when their balances in these accounts that track the difference between, essentially what they had forecast for rates and what they were collecting for rates reaches certain thresholds. So SDG&E has applied for submitted an ERA trigger application, I should say. And they are seeking a modest rate increase on top of what they are going to be doing with respect to the ERA forecast decision. In their original application, they requested an increase that would result in a bill impact of about 3.3% on residential customers, and increase in the PCIA as well of about $2 per month. So not minuscule, but I think modest relative to some of the other rate impacts that we've been talking about. We have submitted a protest and we're involved. Fortunately, SDG&E is committed to applying the energy requirements that were approved in the ERA forecast, which again take into account the customers and the energy needs that will be shifting from SDG&E over to SDCP and Clean Energy Alliance as well. So on top of the rate increase that's going to be noticed here today or tomorrow, there's going to be yet another rate increase that happens before March, or potentially in a little bit later, but the SDG&E is seeking approval in March. So we are looking into some ways to try and smooth this out, so we're not in the position of having to react to these rate increases going forward. And there are some steps that we're taking in the PCIA proceeding actually to assist with that process. But the way the rules are structured now, the utility is required to file this type of application. So we have a couple of rate increases that we'll be looking at going forward as we prepare to launch. While the costs are high, certainly puts us in a more advantageous position than we were looking at when the original ERA application was filed, and we thought that SDG&E was going to be making a substantial reduction in rates. Moving along,
Ty, when was that ERA trigger application filed by SDG&E? Are there multiple ones filed, or is just one that was filed?
It was one that was filed, and if you just give me one moment, I will tell you the date. It was filed on December 11th, 2020. So at the end of last year.
All right, and there's no changes to that application that was filed.
No, one of the issues that we're dealing with, though, Mr. Mosca, is that it's an expedited application. We're having, given the other rate changes that are pending in the ERA forecast, it's been very difficult to obtain data from SDG&E on that particular proceeding, is what I'm hearing from the ERA Council. We've had a couple of discussions about that. So again, we're dealing with some constraints around access to data, and I think in this instance, the rate changes have been moving so fast. It's been, I think, difficult for SDG&E to stay on top of it and absorb all the information and do your rate planning as well. So some of these issues could have been avoided had SDG&E elected to include departing load to begin with in their ERA forecast application, but nevertheless, that's where we are.
Ty, how would this increase affect us?
Again, Mr. Mosca, it's an increase to the ERA, so it increases SDG&E's rates. There are, some of the values are relevant to the PCIA rate, which will be set for 2022. But the probably the most important impact is that it will affect SDG&E's rates, and to the extent the SDCP is indexing or matching rates with SDG&E, that will be an important consideration.
But a negative, I mean, more of a negative, so more of a positive impact for us. But
in terms of the SDCP as a competitor and operating in a competitive market, yeah, it's helpful to us in that respect. Absolutely.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So moving along to a couple of other items, I did want to mention that SDCP, along with several other CCA programs, direct access providers, and IOUs have been instructed to provide some additional details on their RPS procurement plans. So we're working with Pacific Energy advisors on that. Did want to just note this for everybody. We're seeing expanding requirements and requests for information from the Public Utilities Commission around RPS. It's something to watch out for, I think, in terms of our compliance obligations. There's definitely, it's definitely something to note. So we will be working on that, and we may want to have some future discussions about the compliance environment with RPS and with the integrated resource plan requirements as well. Some of the CCA programs are discussing ways to address the fact that these requirements keep expanding and morphing into sort of more and more detailed and more and more extensive requests for data and information that do take quite a bit of time in some instances to supply. So we'll be looking into that as well, and keeping track of how they're working, the other CCA programs, that is. I did want to, from the RPS decision, I did want to point something out to everybody. I pulled a couple of tables, and this is the first figure in the top left is the progress toward 60% RPS on the part of the investor-owned utilities. And I'll just point out that the IOUs are going to be relying primarily on existing generation to meet those requirements. And so something to note. I will also point out to you that in terms of the total gigawatt hours served, that it looks like if you follow the two trend lines in the two graphs, the bottom graph being the aggregated CCA progress towards 60% RPS compliance, that those trend lines will converge. And so in the 2027, 2028 timeframe, so in that timeframe, CCA programs will most likely surpass the investor-owned utilities in supplying renewable power to the state of California. So I think that's something to work toward, and an interesting milestone. While the investor-owned utilities are probably going to be relying primarily on existing generation, you can see that in the bottom graph, the picture is quite different for CCA programs, and that the CCA programs are going to primarily have to rely on new generation that's either under development or will need to be developed. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and I thought it would be informative for everybody to just think about a little bit and incorporate that into their decision making. Just a couple more items. In addition to the arrearage management plan, the Public Utilities Commission is considering another low-income protection plan called the Percentage of Income Payment Plan. It's currently in the early stages of being discussed. CalCCA is active on the proceeding, and interestingly enough, SDG&E opposes the program and argue that it was duplicative. Well, we will keep tracking this, but wanted to make you aware that there may be another low-income payment plan that SDCP may be affected by and may want to participate in, depending on the details. So the last item here is the financial security requirements. CCA programs are required to post these, if it was formerly a bond, to provide the utilities with some security in the event there's a mass return of customers to utility service from CCA service. There's been a transition due to some decisions, and we're moving over from a bond to a financial instrument concept. And then there's been a lot of kind of stops and starts with the implementation. And then we had our own issues with SDG&E's calculation of the financial security requirement amount. But I'm pleased to report that after a bit of back and forth, we got that resolved. And SDCP's FSR obligation will be the minimum, which is the financial arrangement there has already been consummated. So really no further action on SDCP's part. We should be receiving the return of our financial security, our interim financial security bond, which is $100,000 when the Public Utilities Commission is able to move through that process. Sometime, the first half of this year should be returned. That should be returned. So that's all I had. Any supporting materials, reference materials you can find at the link here, which is also in your materials as well. So that's all that I have for today, and happy to answer any questions, of course.
Thank you, Ty.
Mr.
Bill,
Chair?
Yes, hold on for 1 second, Bill.
Okay.
Bill Carnahan, did you, speaking of financial security and financial matters, did you want to make any announcements?
Yes, I'm going to do that under one of the agenda items.
Oh, perfect. All right. Sorry, I didn't know if that was
Since it was
forgotten.
sort of germane to that agenda item, so.
All right. Sorry. I didn't want to steal anybody's thunder.
Okay, you can steal my thunder. It's okay.
All right, Director Baber.
Ty,
Yes.
we're all somewhat sophisticated, but assume you're talking to the general public out there. Can you restate in common man terms what that means when you describe those lines crossing that CCAs will eventually exceed IOUs? I think that's kind of a big deal for our viewers to see.
Absolutely. Let me go back to these two graphs. So again, figure 1 on the top left depicts the aggregated IOU progress towards 60% RPS, which means that the investor-owned utilities combined, PG&E, Southern California Edison, and SDG&E combined are providing the amount of power, renewable power, that you see depicted in the graph here. So, currently, if we look at 2020, it looks like, just reading the graphs, approximately 35,000 gigawatt hours of renewable power to the state of California. If you look at the trend line, it's sort of goes up slightly over time. The figure at the bottom right is the aggregated CCA progress towards 60% RPS. So if you take all the community choice programs combined, Marin Clean Energy, East Bay, and so on and so forth, the graph here depicts the total amount of power supplied by all the CCA programs. The thing that I was pointing out earlier is that if you look at these trend lines, it looks like in the 2027 to 2028 timeframe that CCA programs will be surpassing the IOUs in terms of the amount of renewable power that's supplied to residents and businesses in the state of California. So I think, we just happened to notice that when we were looking through these materials, and it struck me as just an interesting milestone, perhaps in the development of the CCA program.
I agree. That's why I wanted to point it out, Ty. One last thing about that data is that assuming that the existing CCAs and the existing member cities and CCAs won't grow, or does that sort of anticipate we'll have more CCAs and more member cities in the next 7 years?
That's a great question, Mr. Baber. I'm not sure what the assumptions were in terms of this particular analysis.
Okay.
I'm not certain about that.
But the point is, at some point in this decade, those of us who do what we all do are going to, in aggregate, are going to exceed all the investor-owned utilities in how much renewable power we're buying and supplying, right?
That's right.
Right. Good goal to shoot for.
That's right. Yeah, good goal to shoot for. And I think the other point I was making is that the CCA program is going to do that with a lot of new build, which I think speaks to the ability of the CCA programs to, drive job growth, to drive local investment, and to meet some of the other goals, non-environmental but economic goals that the programs have.
All right.
So,
Ty,
and other programs have as well.
Ty, is it too much of an extrapolation then to say that if 60% of each of our loads is approximately the same, in fact, we may be a little larger, that means our load is about equal to the IOUs as well?
Yeah, and and I haven't looked strictly at load, but I see
See where
where
I'm
you're
going?
driving at.
60% of some number is the same, then that some number ought to be the same, right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and well, I think what we're looking at here, RPS makes up, approaching 50% for most of the CCA programs, if not more. And then you have different ranges for the utilities. So the fact that the RPS makes up a high percentage of the power supply, I think goes to your point. So yeah, that's
yeah,
a
so we're
distinct
about as big as
possibility.
they are, maybe bigger, load-wise.
Okay, back to you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to highlight what I thought was a important point because it shows us where we're going.
Yeah, no, good questions and good point. Any other questions for Bill or for Ty? Megan, do we have any public comments on this item?
We do not.
All right. So as usual, this is a receive and file for us. So then we will move on to item number 3, which is a committee report, and we will receive an update from our Community Advisory Committee. And I do see the chair of our Community Advisory Committee, Mr. Eddie Price, here with us today. So Eddie, did you want to share any news with us?
Yes, just a little quick recap. We received an update. We meet with Bill. Bill attends our meetings sometimes and gives us an update. I also meet with Bill, I guess once every 2 weeks or once a week, just to kind of get conversation going. We've established an ad hoc committee to deal with equity and equity issues, to look at that, because we feel that's what, one of the reasons why we were formed was to look at that. We've approved our 2021 regular meeting schedule for 2021, which will be the second Friday of the month at 1 p.m. We also looked at what's on the agenda tonight with the, what is it called? Fair and, inclusive and sustainable workforce policy. And, we're content with what we were presented. Hopefully it stays this way. If it changes and certain words change, we won't be as content as we are now. So hopefully whatever is voted on tonight is what we've received and what was in the packet tonight. We would like, if there's more, if somebody could actually do could look into it more and show us some numbers about whether, unions are beneficial to communities of concern and how all that works out, we would greatly appreciate that. But other than that, if it stays the way it is now, what I'm looking at now, we're okay. But if it changes, we may have, and I'm the nice guy on the Community Advisory Committee, so we may have some problems. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do think, just coming from a SANDAG committee meeting, ad hoc committee meeting, which I guess Director Baber may have had some hand at creating this task. I just came from a meeting where we were talking about putting together a social equity statement. And I worked with La Mesa, with your brand new council member there, Mr. Hsu, with Mayor Sotelo Solis from National City, and Del Mar and others, putting a social equity statement together. And it was a really good experience so far, putting that social equity statement together. I would highly recommend perhaps if we haven't put anything together yet, that perhaps we can start at your committee, Chair Price, where we're putting some sort of social equity inclusion statement together, because I think that really is feeds into our values as a community organization. And so hopefully we can kind of dig into that at some point.
Yeah, and one thing, if I may, me and Bill were talking about the hiring practices that are going on now, that Encinitas is, your human resources department is taking care of that. And that's nice. But, what came up in the back of my mind was how diverse is Encinitas's human resources department, right? Because oftentimes oppression and systematic oppression is baked into the cake mix, right? So, we've talked about ways that we may be able to address that so that the outreach to people who may be able to be hired for the CFO positions, and what does that outreach look like? Because oftentimes checking a box satisfies a lot of people, and that's not going to be beneficial to us.
Yeah,
So I just want
the Encinitas HR is just really kind of a advisory and process kind of function for STCP. The decisions are being made by our interim CEO, Bill Carnahan, and Cody, and the different groups that they put together. But I think it's a fair comment. And I think that if the Community Advisory Committee wanted to recommend any kind of anything in terms of this, how it's being handled by any kind of advisory role from Encinitas, I mean, at some point, I would imagine we'll pull away from any. We have MOUs with La Mesa, with Encinitas, with the city of San Diego to provide services. At some point, we're going to basically have that service in-house and have our own HR people that are going to be doing that. But I would imagine it's really the policies that we have together and the people that we have around the table that are really kind of ensuring that we're hiring a diverse workforce, and we're reaching to everybody we can to make sure that we have a pool of applicants that really reflects the values and the look of our communities.
And
Bill, did you want to add anything?
if I might add, that's the reason that Eddie and I have been meeting on a regular basis and trying to involve the advisory committee also, is to make sure that the most basic thing we should be doing is getting the word out everywhere we can, so that everyone has an opportunity to learn and look at the interest in the job and in fact apply. So we're looking for techniques to even start that process. And we've shared with him where we post, and we would do the same thing with you all if you have places, as I indicated earlier in the meeting today. We'd like to make sure we get the word out, and we'll continue to meet regularly and discuss it. And I think the social equity statement is something we could work on as well. So we're trying to develop a very close working relationship with that group as well as the board, so that we can get those policies in place and make them function.
Yeah, and if I might, one thing that we discussed is maybe having open house type thing for some of the local, chambers, the Black Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, the API Chamber, or the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association, to let them know how serious this is, because we're wrapped up in this, and nobody else knows what we're doing actually. And so it might be a good idea to kind of have some open houses to introduce them to who we are, and the opportunities that exist.
Right. Thank you, Chair Price. Bill, please do work with Chair Price on this. I want to make sure that we're hiring. I mean, to the greatest extent possible, I want to hire locally, and I want to hire, make sure that we're hiring a diverse workforce, and even from an equity standpoint, somebody from a marginalized community would be a plus for us as well. So if we can work with Chair Price to kind of make sure that we're getting those profiles and postings out where we should be getting them out.
Totally agree. And any ideas that anyone has, let me know.
All right,
Chair Mosca, just really quick, if I could jump in really quick on this
absolutely.
conversation. Thank you. I just want to maybe put in context some of the sacrifices that we may have to make to be an equitable entity. And that is that I've mentioned this before, when I go to conferences around this issue, community choice aggregation, there is not a whole lot of diversity. And that leads us to believe that the industry overall will have to do more work. And that may include doing internships, doing things that mirror apprenticeships, as we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I think that it will take more of a sacrifice, because I would venture to say, and I haven't seen any statistics on this, but I would venture to say from what I've seen and what I know about our communities is that the pipeline may not be as big as we would like it to be. And so I think doing some work there, when we talk about equity, it's going to include doing the types of programs that are not only educating our community members about what this is, but then educating about pathways into the industry and being a part of that, being at the end of that pathway for opportunity and employment. I just want to throw that out there. We may have to be a bit more unconventional about those hiring practices.
Great conversation. This has been really good conversation. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I would just associate myself with Director Montgomery Stepp's comments. I like the term a bit unconventional, as putting it very diplomatically, but I would agree wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, let's thank you, Chair Price, Eddie Price, for being with us. You're welcome to hang out for as long as you want to hang out. Let's move on to item number 4. Which is the treasurer's report, and the recommendation is to receive and file presentation of financial results for 2020-2021 period ending 11/30/2020.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Mike is going to introduce the presenters, I believe. I saw it
Yeah.
here. Yeah, there he is.
Hi, Bill. So this one item, I think, Bill, you're referring to the audit financial statements.
That's next, yeah.
We'll do that one next.
Okay.
But we can speak really quickly on item 4. We won't have too much on the financial stuff there, but so the treasury report in the packet, we've included 2 statements. One's the financial statements for the period ending November 30th, 2020. So we're a month and a half plus removed from there. Not a whole lot is going on. Obviously, we're operating in a deficit right now as planned until later in the fiscal year, maybe the early next fiscal year. So some of the things that are happening right now that aren't in these statements, this month we're starting to send out collateral payments for some of our CAISO applications to operate with CAISO. And the next month we're going to have some collateral going out for RA contracts and that sort. And we're actually going to be paying on some of our RA purchases next month. So there's gonna be some money coming in and out next month, and we're gonna be utilizing our River City Bank loan agreement. And I think that's gonna phase in. Hopefully, we're gonna be in the second phase of that loan arrangement sometime in February. So there's not a whole lot of activity that are in these statements yet, but those are a couple things that we're gonna be monitoring and of course reporting on later in the fiscal year. And there's also, so that's a main financial statements we're presenting, and then there's a budget report that we're presenting that shows our year-to-date expenses to our year-to-date actual costs, to our budget costs. And again, we're pretty well in line with those. There's some classification differences that we're going to bring back to the board in the form of an amended budget in the next couple of months, but that's pretty much all my report. Unless you have any questions, we can move on to the audit.
Michael, thank you for that presentation. So pretty much the bottom line is that we're on target. We're on pace in terms of what we previously thought we would be at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're pretty much on target. Like I mentioned, all the larger expenses are going to be coming up in the next several months. So we still anticipate to be on target. But yes, up to this point, we're pretty much where we had planned.
All right, and the collateral, the CalISO collaterals, that's, anything new on that front? Is that pretty much what we thought it was going to be previously?
Yeah, some of those they're just the general required collateral amounts from the CAISO. So that's any market participant has to pay these amounts. Some of them are upfront money that we will get back in a few months after we meet certain financial thresholds. But the money's out the door now, and it'll be maybe 5, 6, 7 months before we get some of that back. But yeah, that's absolutely planned. All new CCAs have to go through that process.
Perfect. All right, let's see if any of my colleagues have questions on item 4, and then we can move on to 5. Anybody have any questions for Michael or for any of our staff? Any comments on item number 4? All right, Megan, do we have any public comment on item number 4?
We do not.
All right, thank you, Megan. All right, Michael, if you want to, we can move to item number 5 if you're also taking that.
I'll just do an introduction here. So this is the financial statements that have been audited for the fiscal year ended 6/30/2020, as required in the JPA. You have to get an annual audit from an independent auditor. Several months back, we hired Picenti & Brinker, an independent audit firm, to perform that service. So they're taking a look at the numbers that we have presented, all the data and background that we have provided to them. So we prepared these financial statements, and they have audited them, and we're glad that they have finished that audit in the last week in order to present here tonight. So I think they have a presentation, and I'm not sure if they can jump on now and share their screen, but Brett or Andrea, Brett Bradford is probably going to present. So take it away.
We're both here. Thank you, Mike. My name is Brett Bradford. You got our slides up. Thank you, Sebastian. And my colleague, Andrea Lifto, is on here as well tonight. As Mike said, I'm Brett Bradford from Picenti & Brinker. I'm the audit partner in charge of the engagement. This slide is just a little quick background on us. We've been working in the governmental space for some time now, and we're working with several CCAs throughout California. So we are inhabiting a little bit of a niche there. And as Mike said, we are going back in time tonight to talk about the period ended 6/30/2020. And from there, I think I'll hand it off to my colleague, Ms. Lifto.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Andrea Lifto. I'm audit manager, been with Picenti & Brinker 5 years, and I'll be presenting to you guys. Want to let you guys know right off the bat, everything went really well. The audit is complete, and we've presented with a clean opinion. So kind of to explain how the audit works is there's the management piece and the auditor piece. So management is responsible for preparing the financials, and our job is to audit that. So we'll look at the control risk, inherent risk, and then from there, we, as the slide says, unmodified opinion. And that means that the financial statements are materially accurate. There's no significant deficiencies that we've identified either through our understanding of the processes between SDCP and Maher.
Those are all good things, by the way. A little bit of jargon there, but that's all good stuff.
So we prepare a risk assessment. Our audit is risk-based. So we focused on several different areas of the financial statements, and I think you guys have a copy of that in your packet. So looking at the asset section, we've got cash and securities. So we confirm with the financial institutions where the funds are held. For deposits, we look at those as well. We look at the notes. We've confirmed the debt with the lenders and the private parties. We review subsequent cash payments, invoices on the accrued liabilities. And then overall, we look at the financial statements and make sure that the disclosures are properly, everything is disclosed properly and without bias. We are required to communicate to you guys several pieces of information. One of those being that the accounting policies that San Diego has adopted are appropriate and they've been consistently applied. And no alternative treatments of accounting have been found or discussed with management. We did not propose any adjustments to the financial statements. So that means everything that you guys recorded was, again, properly recorded, not materially misstated. We did not identify any significant or unusual transactions where, again, the application of the accounting policies would have lacked any authoritative guidance. No disagreements with working with management. We worked within the scope of the audit, the application of the accounting principles, and the basis for the judgments on any significant matters. And we did not encounter any difficulties in dealing with them during the performance of the audit. So not in the planning or during. Is there any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Always good to have a clean audit. So thank you for letting us know that. Any questions for our auditors or for Michael, our finance person? Megan, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right, so this is a receive and file as well. Right, Bill? We don't need a motion on this? I can't hear you. I think you're still on mute.
What else is new? I do that every time. Unless Ryan says we need to have we have a resolution 2021-01, I think. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's the next item. So I think it's just a receive and file, unless Ryan says
So that's
different.
correct, Mr. Chair. It's receive and file.
All right, well, thank you so much. It doesn't sound like there's any other any questions. So thank you guys for auditing our financials, and thank you for the presentation tonight. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
So let's move on to item number 6, which is adoption of resolution granting the interim chief executive officer the authority to execute an amendment with River City Bank. Bill?
Okay, this item itself is pretty mundane. It's almost a housekeeping matter in terms of making some changes to the credit agreement, but we wanted to use it as a springboard for some better news, and that is we're at a point where a very short period of time will be truly operational, and as we approach that point, our credit needs are going to go up, and we're working toward phase 2 of the credit to get the full $25 million. There was 5 to start with, and an additional 20 as a step up. And so we have met with the River City Bank because there were certain conditions that have to be met and certain timing that comes into play as we approach that step up point. And we did. We had pretty much the whole crew answering any questions that they have and going through the pro forma with them. They had some follow-up questions that we answered as well. And I'm happy to report that based upon that and their review, they informed us that we now have been approved for the step up for the full 25 million. So that was the last big hurdle, and we were getting to the end of our startup financing. And we were starting to make more commitments. So it's kind of important that we didn't have a gap in there. And through a lot of people's hard work, including Cody and Glenn, they've been our primary contacts. At least, setting all of this up. Actually, I was here involved at the end to sort of close it up and celebrate, but it went very, very smoothly. They've done this a lot of times with almost all the CCAs, and it's kind of it's certainly a vote of confidence, not only for us, but to show that we're really truly a part of the true CCA community. So that's a great announcement, and I would let either Glenn or Cody talk about the details here, but other than that, the actual action you're taking is pretty mundane, but it was an opportunity to celebrate a little bit. So we would recommend the adoption of the resolution.
Glenn or Cody, did you want to say a few words?
Bill covered it. I'm just really happy that we were able take this next step. And the fact that we're stepping up means that we're checking all the boxes and doing all the right things. So it feels like a big celebratory moment and a relief. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a moment to throw up your hands and say, yay! So thank you, Bill. Thank you, Cody. Thank you to the team. This is another milestone in our kind of startup mode, and you guys have passed with A's and flying colors, and just kudos, because really thankful that we have the funding we need to continue on and get to the next step, which we are very successfully. So. Any questions for our staff on anything we've just spoken about, or comments or anything like that?
If there aren't any, I'll move the item, Mr. Chair.
Certainly. Director Baber moves the staff's recommendation. Do we have a second?
Second.
Dedina can second, or unless Steve did, sorry.
All right, we have a second by Vice Chair Padilla. Megan, did we have any, before we vote, did we have any public comment?
No, we have no public comments for this item.
All right, well, let's vote on item number 6.
Director Montgomery, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Dedina, how do you vote?
Dedina, yes.
Director Baber, how do you vote?
Yes.
Vice Chair Padilla, how do you vote?
Yes.
Chair Mosca, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
All right, perfect. Well, let's move on to item number 7, which is the adoption of resolution approving SDG&E Master Power Purchase and Sales Agreement.
Okay, this is a bit monumental, although some would argue that it shouldn't have been. We've been trying to do business, in effect, purchase power from SDG&E to fill our portfolio for some time now, since about June, I think. And this is really sort of the last step. As we indicated earlier, we're now in discussions with them on lots of issues, including how to purchase energy from them on a bilateral basis, which was their preference. And so this is actually a key part of that ability to do that. And it's the sort of the master agreement that has all the key elements for any deal that you might do. And then what you do is you add attachments or addendums to this agreement to cover the details as you do individual agreements, and that way you don't have to come back and either reinvent the wheel or redo it. We do it on a one-time basis, and it allows us to go from there. So Ryan is here. He's been responsible for getting this done. This is a major stepping point for us, because now we can in earnest begin to try to make some of these arrangements with them a reality, which quite frankly we need. I mean, we have lots of needs, and they have some resources, and we look forward to the opportunity to make a mutually beneficial deal for both of us. And in many cases, some of the deals are fairly tightly controlled time-wise. I mean, literally hours or minutes sometimes. And this will delegate the authority to make those decisions so that we don't miss out on the deal. And then, of course, we will report back to you at the next meeting what we did, so that it's not for, there are parts of it that are confidential, I should say that, but to the extent that we can, we would come back and tell you, what we did and why, and this allows us to make those deals in a timely fashion. So if Ryan has anything to add, he can certainly add it here, but that's really the gist of what this item is.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. This is identical to what the board saw last month when we brought an SCE master agreement to you. You'll see these for all the investor-owned utilities, depending on what you're buying, energy, RPS. We'll continue to negotiate the rest of this with SDG&E. I would say, I can't comment on the specifics, but I would say so far things are positive. So with that, I would be available for any questions you have.
Perfect. So Ryan, is there kind of like a template that all the IOUs adopt in terms of the master agreement? I mean, I know that there's still things to be negotiated, but so do they get together in some sort of room and say this is what we're
The EEI, the Edison Electric Institute, puts out a template for the entire industry for electricity and for gas. There's another trade association called WSPP, and then the IOUs sort of use their own variations. They encourage you not to edit them up too much because that will send it into a 2-3 month process. But yeah, they all have their tweaks and requirements that are a little bit different to each entity. So,
all right. Any questions on item number 7 for Ryan or for Bill? Any comments? Megan, do we have any public comments on item number 7?
We do not.
All right, I'll entertain a motion if there are no questions or comments on this item.
I'll move the item, Montgomery Step.
All right, we have a motion from Director Montgomery Stepp
Dina, second.
and a second from Mayor Tadina. Let's vote.
Director Montgomery, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Dadina, how do you vote?
Dina, yes.
Director Baber, how do you vote?
Yes.
Vice Chair Padilla, how do you vote?
Yes.
Chair Mosca, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
All right, let's move to our last item of the day, and that is item number 8, and it's the adoption of a feed-in tariff schedule application and update to inclusive and sustainable workforce policy. And I will turn this over to, is this Cody, is this yours or is this?
Actually, it's going to be me and then Sebastian. And my only comment is this is an item that actually had its origin way back in August. So this has been around a while, has been reviewed and both by the Finance and Risk Management Committee and the Community Advisory Committee. Eddie, I think you would speak of it during his presentation, but it's fairly complicated in a lot of ways, but it's needed, and it's actually a very good program. It does promote local renewables, and we want to be a part of that. And most all the CCAs and the IOUs and the municipal systems have a feed-in tariff, and so Sebastian has done an awful lot of work on this in terms of putting it together and trying to get everybody's views and get those together. And so I would let him start off and tell you what he would like to tell you about it, and we can have some discussion. There has been some interest expressed in what we're presenting tonight, and then we can go from there.
Thank you very much, Bill, and thank you, SSCP Board of Directors. I'll go ahead and mention that Kirby from Pacific Energy Advisors will cover the technical side of the feed-in tariff, and then I will provide a recap of the inclusive and sustainable workforce policy. Kirby will cover some slight recommended changes on the technical side that are new from December and the months prior. So Kirby, please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Sebastian, and good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here and happy to continue the discussion regarding your perspective feed-in tariff. I know this is a program that received a lot of support from your board during the early stages when it was introduced, and I'm glad that we're at a point right now when we can share with you the tariff itself that's been developed. As Bill mentioned, this has been under construction, if you will, for several months now. It's been shared in concept with your board and then shared in greater detail with the Finance and Risk Management Committee. We spent some time going back and forth to that committee, working through the details, sharing with them our thoughts about recommended requirements and elements of the program, tying those to other programs that were similarly offered by CCAs throughout the state. And I think we're at a point right now where we've got a really good starting point for this particular program that will serve as the basis potentially for expansions over time. So this will get you started. It'll gather interest from prospective local developers, and it'll give you a good sense for what that level of interest is and whether or not the detail points that are enumerated here will be satisfactory in supporting local build out of small scale renewables, which is really what the feed-in tariff program is all about, right? These are the whole intention is to support small renewable energy infrastructure that would serve as components of your overall wholesale supply. And these projects would be complementary to certain of the larger projects that you would be doing business with that might be located in areas where economies of scale are a bit greater and prices are a bit lower. And if you were to compare these smaller projects to the larger utility scale projects on a cost basis, they wouldn't necessarily be competitive. So it's important to kind of find a carve out or a home for those projects with a tariff that's supportive of parameters that are more typically associated with those smaller scale deals, and would support, of course, the economics in developing those projects. So what we have here, I think you've been provided with copies of the draft feed-in tariff itself, as well as the feed-in tariff application. And what I'd like to do, if it's agreeable to you, is just kind of walk you through briefly the feed-in tariff document so that you can see how these different parameters are reflected in that document. And by all means, please stop me as we go if you have questions that you'd like to ask. I think that always works best if we just kind of take these items as they come to your mind. So starting at the top of Schedule SDCP FIT, which is of course the tariff name given to your feed-in tariff. We can see here a general description of the applicability of the program, which kind of characterizes what this is all about. And then after moving from that section, we move into the eligibility criteria. And I think in looking at the eligibility criteria, it's important to note that the projects we're trying to support here are new build renewable projects. So these would be incremental to infrastructure already interconnected to the system. And I think that's consistent with some of the goals and objectives of this organization, really kind of promoting new renewable infrastructure, and in this case, renewable infrastructure within your service territory. We are looking at small scale projects here. So these are projects at or under 1 megawatt in size. And there's a reason for that. There's an issue relating to larger projects and interconnection with the California Independent Operator System, increased kind of reporting requirements and various other oversight that comes with these larger projects. So setting that bar under 1 megawatt alleviates a lot of those concerns and allows for a more expedited interconnection process in most cases, as well as lower costs for the project developer. In terms of the location,
so Kirby, I thought it was larger than 1 megawatt. So you're saying it's up to 1 megawatt. So what's the floor?
The floor would be, it could just be a matter of a couple of kilowatts. So there are projects like that.
So nothing is too small.
Nothing is too small.
So my rooftop solar, good.
Well, so that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. So these need to be interconnected at the distribution level and metered in a way where all of the output is basically flowing to the grid and not to your home. So there is a parameter in the kind of tariff that should be understood that you can't participate in a NEM, a net energy metered program, such as the program you're participating in by virtue of the solar. What's that?
So bad example with rooftop solar, my rooftop solar. So,
well, you gotta double dip where you can. No, I'm just joking. It's a good question. I'm glad you asked it because I think that could be an area of interpretation that probably deserves some clarification. And so, in the event that a customer is interconnected under a net energy meter arrangement, that customer would not be eligible to participate. And if they desired to participate in this program, they would basically have to reconfigure their metering arrangement in a way that would provide, would be intended to provide wholesale supply. So I think in response to your question, you can't do both.
So nothing is too small and up to 1 megawatt.
That's right. That's right.
And then you're saying CAISO, it's a CAISO issue, rule with CAISO that you couldn't be larger than a megawatt, and we can't have a deal with you.
Well, you can certainly be larger than 1 megawatt, but that necessitates a higher level of coordination with the ISO by virtue of kind of the interconnection rules that exist. And so I think for those types of projects, what other CCAs have done, and I'll refer to Marin Clean Energy here, is they've actually created what they call a Fit Plus program. So it's a program that's intended for kind of those mid-size projects between 1 megawatt and 5 megawatts. And it is intended to recognize the economies of scale that come about with slightly larger projects, but is also kind of more considerate of the interconnection process that's associated with those slightly larger projects. So I think if that's your desire to kind of eventually accommodate those sorts of projects, I'd want to bring back some additional information and share it with you regarding how MCE's gone about that. And I think that'd be interesting, just to make sure that we know kind of what we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting topic for the future.
Yeah, and
that especially when you look to some of our communities that are built out, and we want in-basin generation. So these feed-in tariff programs could be very useful.
Yeah, and I would go so far to say that in MCE's case, they have received heavy interest in that feed-in tariff plus program that they created. And I believe it may even be fully subscribed in a rather short time. They haven't offered it for all that long. So, I think what they found is there's a bit of a sweet spot there, at least within their service territory, but they did phase that program in after they got off the ground with the smaller scale projects.
Got it. All right, perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. So in terms of the project location, I just wanted to highlight a bit of a change here. When we met with the Finance and Risk Management Committee, there was an interest in allowing feed-in tariff project participation, not just within the SDCP member communities, but elsewhere within San Diego County. And at the time we had that discussion back in December with the FRMC, we were under the impression that we would move forward with that approach. And shortly after, unfortunately, having that conversation with the FRMC, I had a discussion with your data management services provider, Calpine Energy Solutions, and they informed me that locating projects within the FIT program outside of your member territories would present challenges in reporting data to the ISO and appropriately crediting your organization for the power produced by FIT projects located outside of your service territory. So basically, if you located or allowed FIT projects to be located outside of your member communities, you wouldn't really be getting credit for the energy they produce. You'd still get the renewable attribute, but there'd be about, say $40 of the price you're paying, $50 that would just be stranded. And until rules change, I think it would be advisable to narrow the eligible territory down to your member communities. So
may I ask a question on that? You said we could talk to you as you go.
Of course.
Do you mean, let's just assume it's a rooftop hypothetical. You're saying the actual solar panels have to be within one of our 5 cities, or the headquarters of the business have to be within our 5 cities? Because I see in there it says a local business is defined by having a business license and physically headquartered. Can you just clarify that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer to the question, whether or not the project needs to be physically located within your member communities, that the answer to that question is yes. In response to the question about where the business is located, the answer to that really would trigger eligibility for a bonus incentive, so an increase in the rate paid to the project or not. So to the extent that the business is located within one of your member communities, that would trigger eligibility for a payment enhancement. And then to the extent that it's located elsewhere, then they would not be eligible for that.
So hypothetically, if we had a small project that was solar, but it was located in sort of the back country of East County right now, the unincorporated, we couldn't have an agreement with them?
That's correct. Yeah, in an instance like that, hopefully the project would be larger, and you could pursue that project under wholesale purchase arrangement other than the feed-in tariff program.
Okay, all right, so it doesn't exclude us from that, it just, we
Correct.
can't put it under this category, is what you're saying.
Correct. Correct.
Okay,
Great.
thank
Yeah,
you.
and thanks for bringing that up. That's a really important distinction. So yeah, in no way do the requirements that are applicable to this feed-in tariff program preclude you from doing business with projects located in say, San Diego County that are larger and that interconnect under a different arrangement. So yeah, if you have a 100 megawatt facility located elsewhere in the county and you want to do business with them, you absolutely could. Yeah, it's just really the very narrow scope of this feed-in tariff program and the physical parameters that relate to this program specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so we covered project location. I think this kind of goes without saying, but with regard to the feed-in tariff program, we're only looking at for California eligible renewable resources. So these are resources that meet the eligibility requirements established in the California Energy Commission's guidebook. You can see examples of the fuel sources here at the bottom of page 1 of the feed-in tariff. And they're pretty rangy, right? Everything from wind to solar and various biogas technologies and so forth. So if you meet one of these fuel source requirements, you can participate, but things like fossil fuels like natural gas and stuff, those would not be eligible. So we're only looking for eligible renewable resources here. In terms of the interconnection process, that's something that exists outside of your hands. So this is really in San Diego Gas and Electric Company's control. And any interested feed-in tariff program participant would need to proceed through SDG&E's interconnection process using their rules and paying their fees and so on and so forth, or those processes administered by the ISO, depending on how it is that they're interconnecting. So my point here is that interconnection is out of your hands. You would be reliant upon the project proponent to take care of all of these interconnection processes on their own and deal with the appropriate entities to get those things accomplished. So
how easy is that to do with SDG&E? Is there a group that's kind of set up at SDG&E to facilitate interconnections, and is this generally seen as a positive thing with IOUs? Since it's helping them with generation, or is this kind of a nuisance?
I think for them that this is they're fairly neutral on this because even though they manage the distribution system and maintain the distribution system within their service territory, this project is really kind of interconnecting for your benefit and not theirs. Of course, they want to know how it's likely to impact the system based on where it's located and the uses and other resources that may be surrounding the project, which is why they're going to complete a study as part of this process, make sure that it's not going to adversely impact any of the surrounding customers or the grid at large. And so that's kind of the work that they maintain and perform as part of that process. But in terms of whether they're, whether they benefit from this or not, they really don't. They just need to know how it's going to impact their system. And ultimately, they're going to read the meter, provide the data, in this case to Calpine, which is going to serve as the reporting entity for purposes of communicating that output from the facilities and ultimately getting that output to the organization that's responsible for creating the renewable energy certificates that are going to substantiate the renewable production from the facility. But yeah,
so would we have Kirby or Bill, would we have somebody on staff that would you have, like, say for instance, you have some sort of housing developer in Encinitas that is building 250 units or something like that, and they're going to install, they want to be environmentally sustainable, and they're going to install a bunch of solar, and they want to work with us about potentially being an off taker for some of that extra energy that they may be installing. would we basically, would we just say, go see SDG&E, or would we help facilitate that? Would we have people on staff that would help facilitate that, since this is a program that we desire and want to see become successful?
Well, I would think we would certainly have someone that would be working with them and actually help guide them through the SDG&E process. But the it's SDG&E's system, so they have to be careful and have rules to protect themselves and codes of standards and knowing when it's on and off and safety and all that. So it would that part of it would primarily be theirs. But if it's a program that we want to promote, then of course we would be in the promotion business as well to try to get folks to take advantage. But as Kirby says, that usually isn't a problem with these kind of programs. They usually sell out fairly soon. So, but yeah, we need to be involved. We can't just wait and have them come dump it in our laps. We need to be involved in the beginning.
All right, perfect.
And then in terms of some of the other practicalities here, again, it probably goes without saying, but it's worth just including it in a document like this. The applicant needs to get all the necessary permits to construct and operate and so on and so forth, the project that they're sponsoring, and must maintain those items throughout the term of the agreement. The next item, I think, is important in the sense that it calls out the fact that you are buying a bundled renewable energy product. So you've heard about, bucket 1 and bucket 2 and bucket 3 and unbundled RECs and all that stuff. In this case, you're buying the energy and the renewable attribute, which are produced and delivered contemporaneously, making this a bundled renewable product. You don't just want the energy without the REC, and you don't want the REC without the energy. You're buying both. And of course, the price you're paying is kind of reflective of that value that you expect to receive getting both of those products. Let's see here. In terms of, the power purchase agreement, I'll skip down the environmental attributes here. I think that kind of ties in with the bundled product concept above it. But in terms of the power purchase agreement, we'd expect any participant in the feed-in tariff program to execute the power purchase agreement designed by SDCP. It's a non-negotiable power purchase agreement. That's kind of the whole point, if you will, of one of these types of programs. It's a standard offer program, which means you take it or leave it. We don't haggle over the details. We spec out the contract. If you like it, you sign it. If you don't, then you move on and you do business elsewhere. And that kind of streamlines the process administratively. And one of the items that we're kind of asking for or bringing up as part of this item tonight is, if you so choose to approve the feed-in tariff document that we're looking at now, as well as the related application, we're asking that you give authorization to begin working with council to develop that very power purchase agreement. And it's worth noting that there are many good examples that exist out there within the CCA community, and we would anticipate borrowing heavily from those documents for purposes of developing your own power purchase agreement. But in any case, that would be a requirement, much like any wholesale supply arrangement. And we'd be looking at a term of 20 years. So this is, again, a non-negotiable term of 20 years. So you would have basically a long-standing relationship with this locally situated resource. And I think that's desirable for both parties.
How did we decide 20 years?
Yeah, so 20 years is kind of a common term that's inserted into most of these feed-in tariff program power purchase arrangements. And you could do less, you could even do more if you like. But I think what we've observed in working with other CCAs is that 20 years is really a sweet spot. It provides ample opportunity for cost recovery for the project developer. So if they have financings that they're undertaking, they can work through those processes and know that they have an agreement with a long enough term to provide, payback for any outstanding debt that they have. And it just provides general planning certainty for the resource, because most of these resources have useful lives that exceed the 20 years. And so you would be as the buyer, kind of committing to them for the majority of the useful life of the resource, but probably not its entirety. So you're kind of getting, you know, most of the best years, if you will.
Yeah.
And in many cases, on many of these, I'm just gonna say, in many cases, on many of these projects, if not all of them, even the utility size projects, they like a long-term contract so they can take it to the bank and use it for collateral to get the loan.
Got
So it's as much for them as it is for us. We get 15 and 20 might be the same for us. But if they got 15-year financing, the price would, their cost would go up. So 20 is pretty standard, I think.
All right. I certainly saw the 20 as advantageous for SDCP, but I wasn't seeing the point that you were making, Bill. But this is because ultimately, not only do you want the stability for SDCP, but you also want to incentivize, encourage participants in this program. And so, but this, as Kirby says, quote unquote, this is a sweet spot. So, you know, other CCAs have done it, and this is where they've set it, and it works best for all parties.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right. So an important piece of this puzzle certainly is the price. And right now we have it spec'd out at 8 cents a kilowatt hour or $80 a megawatt hour, depending on how you want to look at it. And this was a number that was developed based on researching the feed-in tariff prices offered by other CCAs. And I can tell you that it's kind of right in the middle of where most CCA feed-in tariff offerings are sitting right now. I think MCE is about ready to drop their price down to $75 a megawatt hour. Redwood Coast Energy Authority is sitting at $84 a megawatt hour. Sonoma Clean Power, their program is fully subscribed and has been for a while, but before they closed it out, they were at $95 a megawatt hour. And I would tell you that, you know, that was probably appropriate before they closed it down, but it's too high now. So I think we're just trying to kind of hit the market at a point where we're not overpaying, we're not underpaying. And I think when we take this number in consideration with some of the bonus incentives that follow, it's pretty attractive, all things considered, for both parties.
And we can watch the response and change it down the line, up or down if we need to, right?
Yep, absolutely.
But how often would you change? I mean, you wouldn't revisit this thing. You would only revisit it every so often, or this is something that there's no issue in revisiting in 6 months from now?
I don't think the idea is you move it around very much, because then you send some funny signals to the market. They don't know quite whether to wait or speed up, you know, to try to hit the sweet spot. So I think you'd want to see what kind of response you got for maybe a year, you know, or 6 months, or whatever you wanted to, whatever you thought your sign up period would be to use the headroom that you set aside. And then if you need more response, you do one thing. If the others, they just cut it off and wait for the next round. You know, if it gets oversubscribed, then that's easy. You just stop for a while and take a deep breath and see what happens. You know, or you could put more money in it if you wanted to.
And presumably that's what MCE was doing with their movement down, is that they're so successful with this. All right.
They actually had prearranged step downs in their pricing structure. So at certain predefined intervals of subscribership, they would ratchet down the price paid. So it was you know, a kind of a predetermined interest-based mechanism. And I think, you know, over time, you could certainly adopt something similar. This is a relatively modest beginning to what could become a very significant program for you. And, you know, if it happens to be the case that this 3 megawatt cap that's suggested is subscribed, you know, very, very soon, then, you know, you could certainly take that as a sign that maybe the price was too generous, and then ratchet it down when you go out and offer your next kind of tranche of capacity in this program.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so
Bill, did you have Director Baber, did you have a question?
They answered it. I was trying to figure out when you would do that step down or not. I think they answered it.
All right.
Yeah, I would also offer that if if it does happen to be the case that you kind of get a lot of early stage interest and that the projects that come to you are able to satisfy the eligibility criteria and they complete the application completely and accurately, so they effectively reserve their place in the queue, I think you might at that point, you might want to talk about more of a longer term plan for this and how it is that you might want to phase in additional capacity over time and build in those pricing steps based on what your appetite is to support these local projects and take on these additional costs. That's all pretty easy to do. And I think MC has been pretty nimble in how they've approached this, and they've definitely made several changes to their program along the way. I think they actually started their price that they initially offered not too long after they commenced service was really close to about $140 a megawatt hour. So you can imagine that was subscribed pretty quickly. And since that time, they've dropped it down quite a bit. But in terms of these bonus incentives, I think the idea here was to reward applicants that met desirable criteria in terms of their project or their business location and so forth. And I would call out here that this all relates back to the project location concept that I previously discussed, and the fact that we had to narrow the eligible footprint for project locations down to the SDCP member communities. And in doing that, what we find ourselves in is a situation where all projects are local projects. And so unless you want to offer a base price of $82.50 and not just $80 for the first 5 years when these incentives would be applicable, then we would simply strike that local project, that item. So it's really entirely up to you how you choose to proceed here. If you just really want to reset the base price to $82.50 to include that local project benefit that was contemplated, or if you want to kind of strip that out and just sit at the $80 price with 3 bonus incentives remaining.
Yes, Joe,
Does
can
that
I,
make
when
sense?
after you answer, now it's time for my question.
Go ahead, Director Baber.
Well, that was one of the my questions was you answered earlier, everything's local because we can't do this outside of our 5 territories.
It was a tweak
So-
that simply didn't get incorporated.
Yeah, so I would just favor removing it because it causes confusion, but reasonable minds might differ on that. To me, it would simplify it. I understand the benefit for local business. I understand cited within a community of concern, although I have a question for Monica on that. Why do you give an incentive for a previously developed site? Why are we paying extra for that? I didn't grasp the economy of that.
Yeah, this is something that's come up in other CCA feed-in tariff programs, particularly in areas that would prefer to leave undisturbed land undisturbed. And so I think this is just an item that you can leave or remove at your discretion, of course. That's intended to just recognize that if somebody is placing a project on a site where things have been already disturbed, that we're going to recognize that with a price kicker rather than saying, here's a green field and we're tearing it up to put in a new renewable project.
On that, I would have to defer to maybe Mr. Padilla or Mr. Mosca, because there's nothing undisturbed in La Mesa. So what do you think about that, either Steve or Joe?
I think it makes sense from my perspective. I mean, we're always trying to, within our housing element and other ways, trying to preserve the open space that we have, and only look to the already improved parcels that are out there.
Well,
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Steve.
put very well, very succinct.
Then my third question is for Monica. In the cited within a community of concern, there's one criteria, California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, and then another one, City of San Diego's Climate Equity. Is that because City of San Diego created their own index that trumps the state, where La Mesa would still be under the state, but you'd be under the San Diego criteria? I didn't understand that.
And I can defer to Cody too, but I will just say, I don't know that so first of all, yes, San Diego's sustainability department did create a climate equity index. I would not say that it trumps EnviroScreen. I would say that it is an additional tool that included additional elements, and it is a broader, covers a broader scope of communities based on the additional elements. But I think that I think that Cody can answer additional questions, but that's my broad answer.
I guess to simplify it, Cody, does having two different criteria change the playing field for different projects if you're in San Diego or outside of San Diego?
It provides further definition to geographic areas within the city of San Diego. So you could use either or to define a community of concern within the city of San Diego. The other 4 cities don't quite have that same analysis yet, so they just rely on the state geographic definition. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
I guess the answer is, I guess the answer is yes, it could present some differences.
It should be additive, though. It should be an additive geographic space rather than mutually exclusive geographic areas.
And if I may add to that, staff is also tracking the development of other climate equity index projects in the region. And whenever those become approved, then our official staff would welcome adding those into the mix. So there are more communities that would be eligible for this benefit.
Okay,
Great.
that's the end.
Sorry. Director Baber, did you have?
That's the end of my questions.
All right.
On this part.
Kirby, did you have more to your presentation?
Just really briefly, I think there's not a whole lot more to cover here. I think one of the key items is just the overall participatory cap in section G. It's currently set at 3 megawatts, which I think allows you to accommodate up to 3 of the kind of maximum size projects or more smaller projects. So it allows you to kind of gauge interest without overcommitting. So I think that's a nice compromise to get things started. There are some forecasting requirements for participants, meaning they need to let you know how much power they expect to produce, so you have an idea for planning purposes. And if they don't hit their marks, that can be a problem for them. Could be grounds for PPA renegotiation or in certain cases termination. One of the items that did come out of the FRMC was the idea of charging a non-refundable application fee of $500 when the FIT application is submitted. I think this is just kind of wanting people to take things seriously, wanting them to be thorough in filling out the application and complete in compiling necessary documentation. And I think that fee, in addition to ensuring closer attention to the application, would also offset any staff costs required to review those materials. There is reference to the application here, of course, and that application is provided to you in the packet as an attachment. I believe it's the very next document following this one. There are some items here in the feed-in tariff regarding the application and the fact that if there are problems with it, there will be an opportunity to cure those for the project sponsor. But then, of course, if they don't cure those, we can kind of in consideration of the project opportunity. And then this is the item section O, Chair Mosca, that you brought up earlier about the NEM and kind of participating in both programs. And so this is the item that kind of specifically prohibits that. And then, of course, you know, this item here, board approval, this won't be effective until you approve it. And then there's also a limitation in terms of the number of applications that can be submitted by any one applicant. And then, you know, the tariff application itself is relatively straightforward. And I won't go through this in any detail other than to say there's just a bunch of information collected about the project, where it's located, what sort of fuel it uses, what form of site control is in place, how will it be financed, what sort of which of the bonus incentives are being applied for, and what documentation is being provided to substantiate the claim to those bonus incentives. And then you know, where do they sit in the generator interconnection process with SDG&E? And then there's a checklist at the end for certain key documents that must be provided. And I think that's about all I had. I know Sebastian was going to touch on the connection between the inclusive and sustainable workforce policy and the feed-in tariff program. And Sebastian, did you want to cover that now? And
did we want to stick with, let's stick with you, Kirby, for 1 second, make sure that if people have questions before we get off the technical side. So just go back to the 3 megawatts. Why did we set it at 3 megawatts? And did MCE set a ceiling like that, or did they just use the pricing signals to control in some ways? I mean, because like 3 megawatts, I mean, it just seems like it isn't all that much when you're talking. I mean, just for the city of San Diego alone, doesn't seem like that much. But why did we set it there?
Yeah, if I recall correctly, MC did take a very similar approach. They realized after kind of releasing the feed-in tariff that initial cap was kind of eaten up pretty quickly. But then again, if you recall, I mentioned it was a very high price too. So, in their case, they wanted to limit exposure to that very high price, and they didn't exactly have that schedule in terms of that price step down worked out. So my recollection is they released the feed-in tariff program very similarly to what we're contemplating here, and then incorporated that price step down after gauging initial interest. You could certainly bypass the step we're talking about here if that was your desire, but I do feel like this kind of just is a very easy kind of intro to this program. And if we find that interest is strong, we could be back in a few months talking about how it is that we're going to incorporate a different adaptation in terms of the participatory cap and the pricing step downs.
All right. Well, I guess if we do go with this, it would be nice to have some sort of sunset, or not sunset, but an opportunity for you to come back and let us know about the progress of this program and how subscribed we are. Do any of my fellow colleagues have questions for Kirby on some of the more technical aspects of this? Or I think I have, do I have anybody? No. All right. So let's, Sebastian, you wanted to chat about this as well?
Yes, Chair. Thank you very much. And thank you, Kirby, for the great technical presentation. Really appreciate it. Just wanted to provide a quick recap on the development of the inclusive and sustainable workforce policy, and particularly on the feed-in tariff section that is before you today. Staff has done extensive research on similar, and I'm going to shorten it, sustainable workforce policies throughout the state. We have looked at policies for Marin Clean Energy, Peninsula Clean Energy, as well as our CCA neighbors to the north, Clean Energy Alliance. The copy that was brought to you in November utilized very similar language that was consistent with what we saw. And the direction that we received then was to bring that copy forward with recommended language for the feed-in tariff to the Finance Committee, and then to the Community Advisory Committee. At the December meeting, we brought it to the FRMC. At that meeting, we received direction from then Director Mark West to look at state requirements surrounding prevailing wage and skilled and trained workforce. At that point, staff engaged internally along with our legal counsel to look at these state requirements, and from that direction, we included that language in the copy before you, where prevailing wage and skilled entering workforce kicks in at a certain dollar value if a project goes above a certain dollar value. From there, we moved that recommended language to the Community Advisory Committee. At the CAC meeting, and I don't want to speak for Chair Price, I understand he's on the line as well, but there was discussion on whether to include some further requirements of skilled and trained workforce and prevailing wage as well. The CAC ultimately voted to move forward with the copy that's before you. And then that's how we have arrived here today. We've utilized, just to quickly recap, the similar policies from other CCAs. They have used encouragements to commercially reasonable efforts, etc. I'll pause right there, and see if there are any questions from the board.
Thank you, Sebastian. Any questions for Sebastian on this the policy here?
Chair, I have some questions. Well, I want to hear if there's any comments from the public before I ask mine, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. Megan, do we have any public comment on this item? Thank you for reminding me, Monica.
Yes, we have two. We have one person, Micah Matrosky, that would like to speak through their computer. And then we do have one written one that I'll go ahead and read real fast. It's from Jason Anderson. On behalf of Clean Tech San Diego, I'd like to express my support for the feed-in tariff proposal and the updated, inclusive, and sustainable workforce policy as proposed by staff. Clean Tech San Diego believes that in order to meet its 100% renewable energy goals, SDCP must support smaller local renewable projects in addition to large-scale utility ones. These smaller projects are not only important to meet your renewable energy goals, but given their size, they can also provide opportunities for smaller renewable project developers and support local jobs. And then our next comment is from Micah Matrosky.
Thank you, Megan. I'll go ahead and unmute Micah. Micah, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, Chair Mosca and SDCP board members. Micah Matrosky speaking on behalf of IBEW Local 569. Earlier today, I shared proposed language with the board to help ensure SDCP's feed-in tariff program is creating quality local green jobs and supporting high road career opportunities in renewable energy construction. And we respectfully urge the board to incorporate these provisions into the SDCP in the feed-in tariff program documents. And I'll go ahead and read the language into the record. SDCP will use best efforts to ensure that construction contractors or subcontractors performing work on any SDCP feed-in tariff project utilize local businesses and local apprenticeship programs and fair compensation practices, including proper assignment of work to crafts that traditionally perform the work. SDCP will require, as a condition of eligibility, that contractors and subcontractors performing work on any SDCP feed-in tariff project must pay at least the prevailing rate of wages as defined in Article 2, commencing with Section 1770 of Chapter 1 of Part 7 of Division 2 of the California Labor Code, and use a skilled and trained workforce as defined in Chapter 2.9, commencing with Section 2600 of Part 1 of Division 2 of the California Public Contract Code. And a few points I'd like to highlight. Clean Energy Alliance incorporated these same state definitions for payment of prevailing wages and skilled and trained workforce into their inclusive and sustainable workforce policy adopted in August. Second, we're asking SDCP to require rather than simply encourage payment of prevailing wages and skilled and trained workforce as defined in the language we shared. And finally, we support the work of the Community Advisory Committee to craft and incorporate equity provisions into the feed-in tariff and other SDCP programs and policies. As we stated at the CAC, the CAC December meeting, IBW 569 is working locally to outreach to communities of concern, veterans, formerly incarcerated, and vulnerable populations, and we support policies and programs that ensure we are delivering community benefits equitably and prioritizing communities where they are most needed. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you. Megan, are there any other comments?
No, that concludes the public comment for this item.
Is there a rule still that you have to sign up? Can a speaker sign up right now to speak? Because I see a hand up, but I don't want to basically change the rules on the spot. So do you have to sign up in advance still, Megan, or how does that work?
That is my understanding that one is supposed to sign up by 3 p.m. Sebastian, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you, Megan. We have changed that a little bit where we allow folks to sign up right before the start of the meeting. That allows staff to gather those public comments and send them over to Megan right before the meeting is called to order. However, I would defer to Ryan on this matter regarding the rules that we have set in place.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the agenda specifies that members of the public who have requested to speak at least 1 hour may be recognized. You certainly can recognize additional public comments at this time, but then I would ask that you recognize anyone that desires to speak as well.
You know, I'm just gonna go with you're supposed to sign up according to the rules that we put out. You're supposed to sign up before the meeting starts, and so I don't want to make exceptions here and then not allow other folks to do that. So I see the hand up, and I apologize for not recognizing you. But I do think that we should stick to the rules that everybody else has followed, which is that you have to sign up before the meeting.
This is Sir Tadina. We need to change that rule. Not allowing people to speak. In fact, I would strongly disagree with you, though. I think it's not hard to let people speak. So let's figure out how to make it as easy as possible to speak to this board. But having lots of bureaucracy about preventing people from speaking to this body is not a good policy. It's not transparent. It does not make us look democratic. So I'm speaking very strongly about it because I run my meetings to allow as maximum public comment. That's how we run the city of Imperial Beach. That's how we have Sandag. So I'm a little upset about that because I do not want to see this body not allowing public comment. It does not look good.
Right. No, I agree. I agree.
I don't want to be a member of a board that does anything to prohibit public comment. It goes against everything we're doing on equity. Sorry, not happy about that.
All right.
So I suggest you.
All right, I agree. I just the only thing is that people have been told in terms of our rules now. I think perhaps Director Tadina is correct that what we should be doing is make sure the rules are as inclusive as possible and allow people to have maximum opportunities to speak. But in terms of the rules right now, we've announced that the rules are that you have to sign up in advance. And so I think it'd be unfair to allow somebody to comment when I didn't let anybody else comment. And so
yeah, I didn't know that. I would never agree to be part of a board that required people to register in advance or prohibited public comment. So, made it as hard as possible to speak publicly. So rules are meant to be broken. The world is broken. Climate change is happening because we've decided to stick with crazy rules that prohibit people from getting engaged. And we're talking about equity. It's a little irony that we're talking about equity and sustainable workforce and transparency and all this stuff, but we're doing things to prohibit people from speaking. So break the rule, let this person speak, and then apologize to all the other people that spoke, and then we can move on, right? Like, don't perpetuate something that's dumb and because of some rule that we pass, it doesn't make any sense.
Mr. Chair.
All right. Yes, Vice
Thank
Chair
you.
Padilla.
I had a point of clarification. I thought I understood, and I thought I understood. I heard Sebastian report to us that we had, and forgive me, Sebastian, if I'm misquoting, but I think he reported to us on the question a few minutes ago that we did kind of modify the rule, lately, where we allowed people to sign up right before the item is taken up. If I understood you correctly, maybe I didn't. But I would also note, I think, and to make you more comfortable, to support you, Chair, you have wide latitude, as I understand it. I believe this body has wide latitude, and you as Chair have wide latitude to allow to take a speaker. And I totally kind of share the sentiments of Director Dedina in terms of, we ought to just open it up and be as transparent as possible when we can, and let folks. And if it's and I get the equity question, but I think as long as about how we proceeded before, but I think if we explain where we're going and that we want to make it better, I don't think there's any harm in that either. So.
All right. Well, let's go ahead.
Mr. Baber.
Mr. Baber, I don't want to get it. I know I'm a stickler for rules. It must be that legal degree I have, but I don't want to basically start having a discussion about a non-agenda item here.
Well, let me a point of clarification, Mr. Chair. Is that that rule you cited, is that a COVID rule, or if we were meeting live and someone wanted to appear at our meeting, would they have to sign up? Did that rule exist pre-COVID, or is that a COVID rule?
There are rules that existed pre-COVID, but these rules are specifically COVID related, and we did modify it recently. And I believe it is I don't think it's an hour before each item. I think it's an hour before the start of the meeting that you're supposed to sign up.
The logic of that was so in a Zoom meeting and under COVID, we can just figure out, treat who's supposed to speak and who wasn't. What was the logic of the rule?
Sebastian or staff, if you want to help us out here. I think it's the ability to accommodate everybody. We started off with folks that we didn't have the ability to have people speaking live, and then they would send in emails and they would be read, and then we finally had the ability to allow folks to not only submit emails but then to also to speak live. And so I think it's just a coordination and logistic item for staff to be able to handle all of it, to make sure that they're able to schedule, they're able to handle whoever is going to speak. I do think that in city council meetings, and had a water authority meeting today where we could have lots of people speaking, it's a logistical nightmare. And where my city council, we generally get 100 people to speak at any night, and so it's a bit of a logistical nightmare. But here we only have 1 or 2 people that speak, and so it's a bit of a different situation. So, but Sebastian or Cody or Bill, did you want to speak to this rule, or?
Oh, I could just respond. I wasn't around for the original discussion, so I don't want to say too much because I don't understand the logic maybe of why it was done this way. But there is a way that you could, if you need to be able to control time, for example, because too many people would take too much time, you'd be there for 2 or 3 days, you could limit the time, speaking time, and some city councils do that. You get 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever you decide is appropriate for folks to talk on items. That would be one way to control if it's a volume logistical situation. I tend to think that having people sign up an hour ahead of the meeting when they may not really understand, and it might be our fault that we didn't explain the item well enough that they knew what direction it was going to go. And so I believe that Director Dedina is on the right track, that we want to be as open as possible, but we do have rules in place, so we could certainly commit, if you don't want to do it today, we certainly could commit to tee up an item with the next meeting. We actually could review that rule and we could bring you examples and you could adopt a new rule. You can do that.
All right, perfect. I've heard the wisdom of all of our board members and our CEO. So let's recognize the member of the public. And can we, I don't even know if you need to bring anything back. Just open it up, I suppose. However the rules are, make sure that people can speak on an item when they come, whenever that item is heard, so that they're able to participate. But let's make it fair so that everybody knows that ahead of time as well. So I'm going to recognize a member of the public, and it's Lane Sherman.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go ahead and Lane, I'm going to unmute you, and you're going to have 3 minutes.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And of course, Lane, I always want to hear from you. You always have really good information. So thank you for chatting with us, and thank you for giving some.
Should I assume Lane is from Encinitas, Mr. Chair?
Lane is from San Diego, I
Okay.
think. No, he's from. Are you from Solana Beach or something,
I'm from
Lane?
Solana Beach.
Got it. Fair enough.
This is Lane Sharman. Just by way of background, the co-founder, along with Bill Powers, of the San Diego Energy District. So, Chair Mosca, I want to reinforce your hesitancy about the 3 megawatt ceiling. It sends the wrong signal to all of the parties in San Diego who are enthusiastic and knowledgeable about local development. And what we want to do is we want to take the 30 or so years dating back to Germany of feed-in tariff development and use those in shaping a market-driven feed-in tariff that is self-adjusting. So we know how to do self-adjusting feed-in tariffs. When the price is too low, we don't have very many proponents. When the price is too high, we have too many proponents. So the feed-in tariff price becomes self-adjusting. But what we want to do is encourage that kind of lesson learned into a high feed-in tariff value at the outset, demonstrating that the San Diego Community Power is on board with local solar and other forms of renewable development. So I just think that's so important. And the 3 megawatt just sends exactly the opposite signal that this is basically, not really something that is going to make a big initial contribution to the power mix of San Diego Community Power. So that's how I feel. I feel very strongly about that. And I hope you all take that up and increase that to at least 20 megawatts, if not something even higher, like 50 megawatts. Thank you.
Excellent comments. Thank you. I think the pricing we've kind of got, but I wasn't really sure about the ceiling there. But thank you. And your suggestion is 20 megawatts.
Yes, I would definitely increase it to 20 megawatts, because as a percentage of your power mix, that still represents a small fraction of your total power mix. And Kirby and your technical crew know how to design self-adjusting feed-in tariff prices, so that if the price has been set too low or too high, how to reset it every 6 months or 120 days.
All right, perfect. And Kirby's not shaking yet, so I assume he's not shocked by what you just said.
I'm not much of a shaker, so.
Mr. Chair, would it be appropriate if I could ask Kirby? I know I can't ask the speaker, but can I ask Kirby to make a comment about the 3 versus the 20 limit? Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Kirby.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the items that we shared with the FRMC committee, and I think it also shows up in the staff report tonight, are kind of assumptions regarding the incremental cost impacts associated with administering a program like this. And while I wholeheartedly agree that a larger program is entirely consistent with the overall goals and objectives of your organization, and I wholeheartedly agree that the feed-in tariff, even at a 20 megawatt participatory cap, would only make up a small portion of your overall supply requirements. I would say that, we're at a point in your development process right now where the utmost attention needs to be paid to program finances. And these programs, and the feed-in tariff program here, since we're talking about it now, they do come at a cost premium relative to other available supply options. Doesn't mean the feed-in tariff program isn't valuable, doesn't mean it shouldn't be larger at some point in time. But I think it's really for your board to consider whether or not it wants to take on, during its nascent kind of stages here, additional power supply costs, rather than launch the program at a relatively modest level and then scale it up once funds start arriving in the bank, so to speak. I think that's really the balance that I think you need to consider. The decision is totally up to you. I'm just trying to be objective in expressing my opinion about both sides here. I think it's a very important program. I think it could be much larger, should be much larger over time. And it's up to you to decide whether or not now is the right time, in light of the fact that early stage finances are always very important to manage.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask Kirby a question?
Sure.
I think we had quantified at least a range of prices. I think it was on a per megawatt basis or something, Kirby. So could we compare the costs for 3 and for 20, so we have a range of what kind of I don't want to call it a subsidy, but what kind of support we would be giving those projects to just give us an order of magnitude? Can you do that?
Yeah, I can tell you off it just right now, straight away, just looking at the $80 base price. What we're talking about is total cost impact approximating 1.2, 1.3 million incremental. So relative to, other available renewable energy options that we're seeing in the market right now.
Per megawatt?
Oh, absolutely not. That's just all in. So this is just total budgetary impact on an annualized basis based on the output that would be assumed for 20 megawatts worth of locally situated solar. So if you compare that to under 200,000 for the 3 megawatt cap, there's quite a difference there.
Yeah.
All right. Any other public comment? I don't see anybody else with their hands raised. And so we're going to go back to Director Montgomery Steppe, who I do remember that you were the last one to speak. And so I apologize. We got off, but we're now back. So we're back to you, Director Montgomery Steppe.
Yes, no problem at all. No need to apologize. I think also believe that it is very important for the public to be able to speak, especially since we have this new platform. We went through this City of San Diego a couple of weeks ago, and it's a lot easier to, even if we put a time limit on it, to let folks speak. So thank you for that. Kirby, I just have a quick question. I believe you mentioned that, I believe it was Marin County, when they changed their limit from the 3 megawatt to increase it in their feed-in tariff program. How long did it take them to increase that?
So that they got their initial interest in their feed-in tariff program pretty early. So I think it was really just a matter of months. I want to say it was within the year in which the feed-in tariff program was first offered.
And I guess comparatively, we do have a larger area, I believe. So ratio wise, how do we fit in with what they began with based on their load or what they were supplying?
Yeah, if I recall, and don't hold me to this, but I believe they were at 2 megawatts, and so I think you're at 3. Ratio wise, I wouldn't be able to tell you the exact percentages, but certainly the 3 megawatts relative to the 2 reflects your larger footprint. Could it be bigger? Absolutely, it sure could. I think it's just a matter of, whether or not your board wants to take on those additional costs. I think scale is really entirely up to you, whether it's 3 or 5 or any other number of your choosing. I think it just comes down to making sure that you're comfortable with the with the incremental costs that you would be incurring.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm interested to hear where the other board members are on that as well. But I think it's a good point that was raised by Mr. Sharman. So just going to the workforce, inclusive and sustainable workforce policy. Sebastian, I just wanted to get clarification on whether the additional language that is being requested, I believe by IBEW was brought to both of those committees in that form.
Thank you very much for your comment, Director Montgomery Steppe. Yes, both comments were sent to the Finance Committee and also to the Community Advisory Committee.
Okay, so in the Community Advisory Committee came out where, I don't know if Chair Price is still here, but what I want to know kind of what the legal analysis was around it based on what is currently, looks like the document was sort of mirrored from Marin County. It looks like it's pretty solid. Also, just based on the size of these projects so far, I am concerned about leaving certain apprenticeship programs out that may be in the communities that we are trying to serve. That's one of my concerns, and legally I want to know if that would be a possibility. If adding the additional language would be effectively carving some folks out based on those state requirements.
Hey, Ryan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, we reviewed the language. It's really a policy decision by the board. You have the ability to require the apprenticeship and local workforce language. You have the ability to require the prevailing wage language. You also have the ability to require a best efforts language or no language at all. So there isn't a state law requirement as to these two issues. I think staff saw that folks are using, some use best efforts, some have a requirement to pay prevailing wage. And certainly if you did that requirement, then there would be some sort of check to ensure that, the county per diem of wages is being paid for that particular classification. But certainly that's this board's pleasure. I believe the current language reads, I've been having a little problems with my computer, is a best efforts language for both categories. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, a little bit, Ryan, but I definitely understand it's a policy decision. I just want to understand intended and unintended consequences when we're talking about equity. This is a conversation that I know my building trades folks know that we always have, and that in particular, some of our trades are leaving out African-American workers in particular. And what I don't want to do is add something to this workforce policy that would unintentionally also contribute to that problem and issue that we're having with equity. And so that is where I raised my concerns and wanted to know if the language would exclude certain pre-apprenticeship programs or programs that are trying to build that pipeline for our trades. That's what my concern is around the change in language. I am happy to discuss this further or hear from my colleagues. I will say that where I'm at now is leaning towards the language that has been put before us, especially based off of the consensus of the Community Advisory Committee and their focus on equity as well. that's kind of where I am right now, but I'm want to hear from my colleagues.
Yeah, if I may interject here, if I may I?
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, we went back and forth on this and trying to come to a happy place where, you know, to Councilwoman Montgomery Steppe, I think that's the first time I've ever used your whole name. Her concerns about what we would be locking ourselves into or locking ourselves out of, right? And the language that's in there now is kind of, let's the board kind of make those decisions later on, right? As a matter of fact, the Community Advisory Committee would have liked more equity conversation and verbiage in this sustainable workforce to define exactly what we're talking about to address some of the Councilwoman Steppe's concerns. But we kind of settled on, okay, if this is the way it's going to be, it's not really locking us into anything, nor is it locking us out of anything. And when I say us, I mean the community that I live in and I serve and I represent. You know, I'm not opposed to, and I've said this before, I'm not anti-union, but I am pro-hood, right? I do love my community and don't want it to be left out intentionally or unintentionally. So, you know, we came to a conclusion that as it was written would suffice and should make everybody happy, and we'll just fight later on down the line.
All right, thank you, Chair Price. Director Montgomery Steppe, did you have anything further on this item?
The last thing I'll say is it looks like we will be revisiting this just based on even the technical aspect of it if we don't decide to increase our megawatt amount for the projects today. So it looks like we'll be revisiting this, and I am comfortable with what our committee has come back to us with and what staff has come back to us with.
Are you comfortable with the 3 megawatt ceiling as well, or would you push that up or just wait for some progress report?
Well, I would like to hear from you all on that. I'm, willing to explore going up, but again, if we start here and we revisit based on interest, I think we'll still be in a decent spot. I am concerned that is pretty low, but.
Right. I wonder, Kirby, if there's any kind of, if we can have some sort of kind of, Lane talked about 20 megawatts. I mean, is there some sort of like aspirational goal that we could have? I mean, I say 20 megawatts in a certain period of time, and so that we could continue to step up to that, or do you think is your advice like it's kind of let's see how we can handle it as we move forward?
Well, I think if it's an aspirational goal, assuming your fellow board members are of like mind, I think you just expressed it, right? So whether or not it's written down somewhere, it's totally up to you. I mean, this could be revisited monthly or as you see fit. Certainly you'll be receiving updates from staff regarding progress that's being made in subscribership. And I think, because you're meeting on a monthly basis, you're going to be pretty nimble in how it is that you can react and how it is that you can reset. I totally appreciate the kind of, enthusiasm behind wanting to set a larger cap from the get-go. But I think, having been through so many CCA implementation processes and operational support situations, I would just say my recommendation to you would be keep that goal in mind, have that, very near the forefront of your mind, but make sure that you get your finances in order during early stage operations and kind of pace that commitment when you have the funds to do so.
All right. I mean, I guess I assume kind of slightly like Lane, why do we even need a cap? Just use the pricing signals to kind of control it. But
yeah, it's there. I will say this, and I think this is important. I appreciate the comment Lane made about the self-adjusting tariffs. They're certainly out there. The utilities use them. I think they can be effective, but it's also worth noting that the utilities have, hundreds of staff people that administer these programs. And I don't think you need to be reminded that you don't. And so I think, the simplicity in having a fixed price arrangement right out of the gate is really intended to minimize the administrative burden associated with having to, perform these updates and manage that process over time. So you can certainly move in that direction. It's not a bad idea at all. But I would, I just think where you are right now, staffing levels and so on and so forth, that this simplicity makes sense.
Could I comment on that, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, and then let's go around the virtual table here and hear from all of my colleagues. Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, I was going to suggest that along the lines of what Kirby was saying, because it does impact staffing and other things. And what we really don't know is this idea of proportionality. What 3 megawatts to Marin is equivalent to what to us, to see just on a proportional basis. And that maybe what we could do is actually adopt the 3 megawatt level and then say that we're going back and monitor and review and do these kind of studies to see if there is some other logical way to sort of maximize what we really can do, not minimize it, but maximize it on some kind of a logical method, say within 6 months or something like that. That would allow us to get going. That would allow us to start the program and then take a little more systematic look at what a reasonable level would be, what the impacts are, the staffing wise and others. And we could come back then and look for a course correction or not at some specified time frame, 3 months, 6 months, whatever you'd like to choose. So we keep the process moving, but we're going to fine tune it a little bit as we go along.
Thank you, Bill, for those comments. That's a really good point. Good thought. Let's go around and see anybody else have any final comments or questions for staff.
Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, with respect to the question on 3 megawatts, I mean, I sort of echo my colleagues. I'm comfortable given sort of the phasing and not an unknown around participation about monitoring that, coming back with progress on it. I'm happy with where we pegged that, at least at this stage. I want to be sensitive to my colleague, Director Montgomery Stepp, about unintended consequences. At the same time, I want to be supportive of, as I've said many, many times, of being supportive of putting into action the values that we sort of chartered in our organic art, documents as an organization dealing with, supporting labor folks and the benefits that brings to community and indirectly addresses those issues in other ways. The requested language from IBEW is best efforts and does include specificity around our advisory committees continuing to come back and get clear, a crafting of clear equity provisions that address that. I think the real nut here, and I can back to the other comments, is there is some language which is distinct here, which is on the requirement around prevailing wage. And I can see where that may actually have a question mark. So I think where I'm at is I'm supportive of the requested language, but what is missing, and I think it goes to the fact that staff has not made a recommendation here one way or the other, really than other just to present the facts and present to us what our advisory committees have advised. I think the key question here is there some analysis that's been done around this requested language that would give us an idea of what, if any, quantifiable actual impacts there could be, whether, particularly at this scale, right? So particularly within this program. And would there be an exclusionary impact in some way based upon this language? And to be candid, I'm not sure we have that answer. I'm not seeing any, and in the absence of that, in the absence of staff flagging that, I want to be supportive of the requested language, I do. But I think that is a legitimate question. And I wonder if staff could, if Bill or anybody could comment further on the fact that there is not a staff recommendation on this language. It's just simply, we do have it, our advisory committees have kicked this around, but there isn't really an analysis around whether this would have a negative impact or not. And that's kind of missing.
Bill?
You're absolutely right. We did not make a recommendation, and I guess the reason we didn't is we felt like the advisory committee was probably, at least in my mind, was as good a judge on those kinds of issues as we might be as a staff, and I was willing to concur and sort of implicitly endorsing their recommendation by not countering it with something different. I guess that's really would be my defense in this case, is that we did sort of implicitly endorse, because they had a lot of discussion and they're very focused on that issue. They represent a broad interest throughout our service territory, and I felt like that was probably, in my mind, the best group that we could rely on, and so I went with that. I guess is the reason I didn't encourage us to do a staff recommendation alone.
All right, I may have further comments. I want to hear from my colleagues. Again, I'm generally supportive of this requested language, but I'm also sensitive to not overlooking anything. And there's some of this piece that we just don't have really any kind of independent analysis around. And I think that's important as well.
Yeah. Joe, it's Bill.
Do I have the waiver?
The requested language and what's written here, let me focus on something that Mr. Padilla said. I thought the requested language would require prevailing wage, and this says encourage. If that's the point of contention, I have to tell you, La Mesa is a general law city. General law cities in California on public works projects are required to pay prevailing wage. I'm not familiar with a rule that says we're under this obligation, then when we go to a JPA, we lose that obligation. I only want to debate that. It's the law of La Mesa that when we do public projects, we pay prevailing wage. So the fact that if we're debating over whether it's encouraging prevailing wage or requiring, I think I'm okay with it saying requiring. And for the record, for the geeks out there, and you probably get this, Mr. Cal, when we talk about prevailing wage, it's not just the wages, it's the whole work rules that come with California's prevailing wage. I'm assuming we're talking about the whole body of work rules. So I would say require is the right language in that second paragraph. Sebastian, or did you even, or Ryan, did you guys even look at whether or not we have the option to not pay prevailing wage here? Because you can make an argument it should be required because we do have the obligation.
We looked at whether San Diego Community Power had the requirement to pay prevailing wage. And because you're only paying, you're buying power, you're not actually constructing the project. Prevailing wage in this case is when you have, public monies going toward, the construction of a project, or there's some other, funding aspect of it. Here, these are privately developed projects. You're really only buying power, so prevailing wage does not apply. You do have the ability to require it. Certainly, if the board wanted to look at this exclusivity aspects that were raised by both directors, we could bring that back in the contract itself, or in some of these applications, and bring those back, because I do note that the recommended action asked to bring the power purchase agreement back, and maybe there's requirements that we can put in there as well, but no, you're not required.
Okay, so Ryan, you're saying because it's not our project, we're buying it on the open market, we can't impose prevailing wage, or we could impose prevailing wage on what we buy?
No, you can certainly require it to be paid.
Okay, so if the question is whether we should, not whether we can or cannot, I would argue that we should.
And I would absolutely echo that, of course.
Can I just, yes, me as well, but my issue is around the language with regard to skilled and trained workforce, and what the state law requires with regard to the apprenticeships that are accepted under that program. And so that, or under that law. And so that's where I think more legal analysis needs to be done. That is where I'm having, I want to make sure that there's not unintentional exclusivity around that language.
And if I may interject here, the issue is not money. It's not prevailing wage. That's not the issue. The issue is opportunity. That is what the issue is. And if we implement something that denies or curtails opportunity inside of communities of concern and anywhere else, then we don't need a study for that. We've already seen the ramifications of these types of principles and projects that are mandated to exclude communities of concern and members in communities of concern. It's hard to say, you want veterans and you want, returning citizens from the penitentiary, but you don't make the opportunities necessarily available to them. You put the whole onus on them getting a job with you on them, and that's unfair. So every time we put something in that is hardcore, we must, we should, we require, from a Black man that's 60 years old, I know what that does to my community. I've experienced that in my community. I don't need a study. I don't think anybody on the Community Advisory Committee needs a study. It's simple. As soon as you start putting hardcore requirements on something, you naturally leave people out. That is the purpose of the hardcore requirement. And all we're asking is that don't make it a hardcore requirement that you must have apprenticeship programs. We don't have pre-apprenticeship programs. Now, I'm taking this stance now, but I'm willing to talk with folks who have apprenticeship programs and who have labor unions to say, hey, let's create a pipeline. But don't tell me you're going to create a pipeline later. Let's just do this now, because it never happens like that. So I'm going to go on mute because I feel my voice raising.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate all these arguments. It seems like they get conflated. Can I tease out the concept of prevailing wage apart from the things that Eddie said? Because it doesn't even sound like Eddie is disagreeing with prevailing wage. It's two different paragraphs. Let's call it paragraph 1 and paragraph 2.
All right.
On paragraph 2, it says encourage contractors and subcontractors performing work on feed-in tariff project to pay at least the prevailing wage. So the question, do we have disagreement on whether we should require prevailing wage? If we do, that's fine. I've stated my opinion, but I'm just trying to keep the issues separate so we can discuss them logically.
All right.
Well, Bill, even in my humble opinion, even in that particular paragraph, there are small companies in San Diego, and I would venture to guess in La Mesa that may like an opportunity to do this, that can't quite pay prevailing wage and all the other stuff.
Okay.
And
so they fair enough. Then Eddie is connecting his argument. Fair enough.
All right. So Director Baber, are you finished with your comments? Did Director Baber did you have any feeling on you had mentioned the local versus outside of the territory and also bonus incentives? You're fine with the language, except you would say stay local. We don't need to.
My only question to Kirby is you kept referring to setting our 80 as sort of where it is in the marketplace, but practically speaking, it's 85. It's at least 85. It might be 87.5 if you use all the bonuses. Did you mean even with all the bonuses, we're still sort of safely in the middle or not? We're factoring the other. You said two things, Kirby. You said when you set the $80, you said that puts us in the middle, and then you started talking about the bonuses. Did you mean we're still in the middle if the majority of our purchases have all three bonuses?
It in the, you mean middle of?
I was trying to use
the-
your words. You were trying to say it's in the
Oh,
normal market
I think
range.
when I was referring to that, I was referring to the prices offered by other CCAs.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, okay. So some of those CCAs also have incentives. So yeah, you're still in the middle.
Okay, fair enough. That was my only question on that,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
All right.
This
Thank you.
is, Chair, Board Member Dedina, am I allowed to speak? Just want to make sure.
Yes, it's.
Yeah,
it- you-
I'm not
you-
clear about
you
the
are.
rules there about speaking, but look, I agree with the prevailing wage, and we need to do everything we can. This is year zero. Everything we did before year zero was a failure. It resulted in catastrophic climate change and a pandemic. In my city, it resulted in an ongoing pollution crisis that no one can figure out. So if we don't commit to this board and having this organization, because we're committed to dealing with climate change, to doing things differently and elevating people's wages and standard of living, doing things that are actually going to save the planet, then why bother? So I'm gonna always push this board to do the right thing and do the better thing, and not get trapped in arguments that we made before that failed. And we really have to, if we're not the ones advocating that, then this is a waste of time. So we've got a Green New Deal coming. We've got national infrastructure bill happening. We've got a whole paradigm shift in the United States about paying people decent wages and training people then to have those jobs and good jobs to actually do things that help save the planet. So let's make that commitment. But let's also make this less complicated. Honestly, until Bill spoke, it was really hard to figure out what we were talking about. So let's make sure we simplify things. So if I'm having a hard time following the arcane language in small paragraphs, then I'm sure the members of my city, a working class city, are having a hard time following it as well. So let's commit to elevating the way that we do things. Let's commit to simplifying things and speaking clearly, and then making sure I'm clear about how we speak, because it's never clear to me how we do that. So anyway.
All right. Thank you, Director Dedina. And for anybody, for all of you, just jump up and shout out, and I'll recognize you as quickly as possible. I want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to speak and say whatever you want to say. I monitor the hands up, either in your screen or where you can raise your hand virtually. And so any way you can get my attention, I'll recognize you and try to keep the conversation going. So it sounds like Director Montgomery Steppe.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Chair. I'm sorry about that.
No, so I now have two hands. So I'm going to go to Director Montgomery Steppe first, and then Vice Chair Padilla, and then Chair Price if he wants to have a comment.
Okay, I want to just quickly respond to my fellow board member, Mayor Dedina, who is absolutely right that we are in a state of crisis. I would also just point out, though, that these systems, we absolutely need to support paying people what they deserve and making this world a better place for everyone. And the systems that we have used, including some of our unions, have discrimination within them, and everybody does not come out the same. And so I want to make sure that that is clear, that yes, we may have this, all of us have different perspectives. We have different life experiences, and that's what makes this so complex, on top of having to deal with the energy industry. It is very complex. I'll try my best to, make my comments more simple, but this is complex. There's no way around it, and not everyone gets treated the same way in every arena. I will also say that I've had very positive conversations with fellow labor leaders, so I'm not downing anything that's going on and the support that I have seen recently. But I also know that has also had systemic issues. And so I'm not going to ignore that. I think we agree on more than we disagree on, but I'm not going to ignore it. And also, I think we need to respect each other in this space and all our different experiences. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Vice Chair Padilla.
Thank you. Echo that. Look, I hear my colleague, Director Montgomery Steppe, and in some ways, really going at the heart of a long-going problem around issues of inclusion and diversity, even within the labor movement. And that is completely valid and long past due that those conversations happen. And I know that Director Montgomery Stepp has been working very hard to not only lift that issue up, make it visible, make people aware of it, but to push to change it. And I respect and I agree and I support that wholeheartedly. I think what I struggle with here is that I don't want to link these to the point and to the extent and for the length of time that what we end up doing as a public agency is we end up not doing the broader good, even when it's imperfect. And even when there are issues that have to be addressed. In other words, we all said when we came to this table that support for the labor movement in general, if imperfect, is a value that we wanted to advance and to champion, that we wanted to send a signal against the status quo, that a public agency was going to favor participants who paid, who not just abided by the law, but went the extra mile to support working men and women and to support the labor movement because of the benefits that they bring in a society where the middle class is disappearing. And I just don't want to see us get in a place where we're letting the fact that there are great needs and imperfections here be the enemy of the broader good, even if it's imperfect. And I don't know that we're going to solve it in this case. What's before us is whether this language, including on the workforce language, is something that generally speaking as an agency we should get behind or not. Policy call. And that really is related, but not necessarily should be entangled with the question of the important work that needs to be done with the labor movement and within it to expand its horizons and to make it more inclusive and not exclusive. And I just, that's how I see it. I see we're getting bogged in that. And sometimes it's a tough choice because there are no perfect solutions. But on balance, when I'm left with the chance to either support the labor movement or not, I'm going to support the labor movement. And I'm also going to be committed to working to make that movement better and to really realize its higher aspirations in concrete ways, not just through talk. And I stand ready to participate in that, Director Montgomery Stepp, with you in any way I can. And I certainly don't pretend to have all those answers because these are difficult and deep issues, but we have to face them. And so that's sort of how I see it for my colleagues. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Padilla. Chair Price.
Yeah, first I'd like to apologize because I kind of realized I might have got a little loud and my tone of voice and everything. So I apologize for.
You are always appropriate.
Thank you. I apologize for my emotion, but I will never apologize for what I said, right? And if we're going to hold some type of accountability, the line has to be somewhere, right? And if there's going to be some accountability, it has to be now. If we just perpetuate what we've been doing with labor is going to continuously perpetuate what they've been doing with communities of concern and say, we'll get to it later. We'll get to it, later on down the line. And that's why I appreciate the fact that there's options in this document here that says, okay, it kind of forces them to work with communities of concern, right? Because there's no option. But if we have to, my community always has to work with them, has to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to labor. We have to work with labor. Labor does not have to work with us, nor has labor actually worked with us equitably and with equal opportunities, right? So, I again, and I'm starting to get loud again, so I'm gonna try to wrap this up. Again, I don't apologize for what I said, and I stand upon what I said because I'm out here also, trying to create relationships with labor for the communities that I serve to get them into the industry. But I'm always the one that's only doing the work or have to come up with ideas. And that's going to continue if we're required to deal with the union. If we're required to deal with unions, they have ways of oppressing us that are systemic. And since 1642 sometimes. So You know, I appreciate the way it's written now because it leaves it open for conversation. Again, to the Mr. Baber's point, I'm not opposed to anybody getting paid. I want everybody to get paid. So I'm with fair wages. I'm with, you know, fair wages and health plans and all that kind of stuff. However, I know everybody can't reach that plateau right now, and they don't all live in Southeast San Diego. A lot of them live in Imperial Beach. A lot of them live in La Mesa. There's one or two people that may live in Encinitas that want this opportunity, but have to go through a opportunity guard called labor, and they have to join the union before they can work on something that's being put right in their front yard. So, you know, I stand committed to where I'm at on this also. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Chair Price. All right, we've had a lot of conversation on this, and I think that we have some consensus. And so I will entertain a motion if somebody wants to attempt to craft a motion on this.
Well, it's Bill, I'm raising my hand. I'm not sure about everything there, but certainly the second paragraph I will try. It's moreover, SDCP will further encourage, instead of further encourage, I would argue it should be require. And mainly my response to Eddie is, if you require prevailing wage, that doesn't mean you're requiring union. Non-union folks who work on a public project can be paid prevailing wage. Prevailing wage is independent of union or non-union status. So prevailing wage is it's the amount of wage, but it's also the work rules that come with that. So my proposal is that in 2C, the second paragraph within 2C, where it says, moreover, SDCP will further encourage contractors, I would remove the words further encourage and require, and I'd replace further encourage with require. That establishes that we're going to buy these feed-in tariff programs from people who are paying prevailing wage, independent of the union or non-union issue.
Right, so what I guess I'd like clarification, Mr. Baber, what are we leaving out of the requested language then in the motion? I mean, I'm not.
If you, Mr. Petty, if you look at 2, C, feed-in tariffs, the second paragraph, it says, moreover, SDCP will further encourage contractors and subcontractors performing work on any feed-in tariff to pay at least prevailing wage. I'm telling you, if you encourage them to pay prevailing wage and don't require them to pay prevailing wage, they're not going to pay prevailing wage. So my motion is on that section right there. If you want to add to it on other things, that's fine. I'm just trying to nail the prevailing wage thing down here.
Right, but for clarification, you're strengthening that language, which I would support, but in general, you're supporting, you're moving that we would incorporate the requested language before us.
Okay, I see the dilemma. I was slicing out one paragraph without doing the whole thing. Do you have a suggestion for the whole thing, Mr. Padilla? Do you have a suggestion for the first paragraph? Yes, you're correct. I was only attacking the second paragraph, but that leaves an incomplete motion.
Right. I mean, I'm happy with the balance because, you know, I'll refer you back to my prior comments. I'm happy with the suggestion to strengthen that requirement. And I would, you know, again, that requirement may or may not include responders or participants or bidders that are organized or not, as long as they meet the standard. And then I think if we're all understanding that, I don't know that that's necessarily then, even with IBEW's requested language that would be exclusive necessarily per se, on the other question of an expanding opportunity in communities where that opportunity has not been present. And I think that's an important distinction in this conversation. And I would second your motion to clean up that particular paragraph's language.
Yes. My notes on what IBEW said was they had asked that it will require as a condition of eligibility that contractor and subcontractor performing work on must pay. So I support that.
All right, so let's get this straight so that staff is clear. And staff, please chime in if you're clear on the direction here. So Director Baber, your motion is to adopt the staff's recommendation, except you are going to change you're going to change that STCP will require as a condition of eligibility that contractors and subcontractors performing work on any STCP feed-in tariffs project must pay at least the prevailing wages as defined in Article 2 of Chapter 1 of Part 1 of Division 2 of the California Labor Code. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. But I'm not trying to cut off debate on the first paragraph. I was just trying to focus on the second paragraph. Does no one else want to talk about the second paragraph, or we've settled?
Well, I think the first paragraph.
The first paragraph is.
I think the first paragraph is consistent. I think they're both consistent. Am I getting? I think you will use best efforts. I think the best effort standard is consistent with the language that we've received from IBEW. So the only difference is with the second paragraph, it's it must pay at least prevailing wages, and we have the best efforts in ours in our staff language. So you're
correct. That is the correct analysis. At least the analysis I agree with.
If I may interject here again, this is one of the reasons why we kind of, with the advisory committee, wanted to insert some equity language in here, right? Because this would mean that there has to be an established company that has a track record that can afford to pay prevailing wage. So that leaves out workforce programs, that leaves out trainee programs, that leaves out a whole swath of individuals that won't be able to take advantage of this, of these opportunities, you know.
Well, Eddie, can I make a point? We, SDCP, are paying, if we require them to pay prevailing wage, they then alter their bid package. Everyone's bid package goes up when you require prevailing wage. So it's not like we're requiring them to pay prevailing wage and they're losing money. 95% of the times I've seen it, they raise their bid to accommodate that, and then they pay the extra to their employees. If you know who it costs more to pay prevailing wage, the government agency. Usually the contractors take that extra cost they pay to their employees and pass it to the government agency. Bill, am I wrong on that?
No, I agree.
All right, so let's so we're in the process of this motion. So can you finish, Director Baber? So
I was just trying to change.
All right.
Let's keep it as simple as possible. Take out the words further encourage in that second paragraph and replace it with require. I'm taking out two words and putting in one word. That was my motion.
And then what about the latter part of that, the IBEW language, which is and use a skilled and trained workforce as defined in Chapter 2.9, Part 1, Division, all that stuff?
Well, if you read what we have, it says to use a skilled and trained workforce. Skilled and trained workforce is a term of art. I don't know, maybe, you know, when you see the term of art in a contract, it means what's commonly acceptable. And my understanding is it means what they said. If you feel like replacing the rest of that paragraph with the way our public speaker did, that's fine too. But to me, it was just read into it.
All right, perfect. All right, so it's just changing that term require. And then everything else is staff recommendation on that.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, may I clarify something?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so skilled, the term is defined by the Public Contracts Code. It means at least 60% of the skilled journey persons employed to perform work on the contractor project by every contractor and each of its subcontractors at every tier are graduates of an apprenticeship program for the applicable occupation.
Right.
Except there's exclusion for about 15 different other occupations. So it does have a threshold requirement.
Which I'll wait to be recognized.
What did you say, Ryan? That the threshold requirement is de minimis as far as my understanding of it. Are you saying there's a difference between requiring it the way our staff wrote it and requiring it the way that by citing those code sections?
No, the code sections that are cited by IBEW point to the definition, which means that at least 60% of the skilled journey persons employed must be graduates of an apprenticeship program. So that is, the legal definition of skilled and trained workforce.
Okay, Ryan, when I read what staff wrote and I saw skilled and trained workforce, my brain, because I worked in this area, implied what all those code sections. If you say it's easier and better to explain to our feed and tariff people to actually list those code sections, I'm okay with that too. That's legal drafting. What do you think?
I'm sorry, I'm fine with the current language that's before you. I just wanted to clarify what the definition of skilled and trained workforce was in state law.
Yes.
If I could just real quick come in here, this is what I said before. The reason why the IBEW language is sort of broken up is because there is the prevailing wage requirement, and then there is the definition, as Ryan just read, of skilled and trained workforce, which does put additional requirements and burdens. Well, it could be seen as burdens on those companies. And so there are additional thresholds that would have to be met, which is where I bring in this exclusivity argument, where we don't know who we're leaving out with that clause. It's beautifully written in the document, but there's a legal definition that is attached to that. And we don't know what kind of impact that will have. Like I said before, I will support the prevailing wage requirement in here, but it is, I can't support the skilled and trained workforce based on that legal definition and not knowing what the consequence of that is, whether our community college programs will be accepted in that definition, whether grid will be accepted into that definition. I don't know that right now. And so I know that those programs house an additional pool of folks. So
Monica, my proposal was to replace 2 words with 1 word and not change anything else. Are you saying if we did it my way, where I replace those 2 words, will further encourage or require that changes what you just said?
I'm saying in the paragraph that 2C, the second paragraph, where you change the word encourage to require, I would support that if we strike and use a skilled and trained workforce.
Okay, that's is that a second to the motion?
Well, I think Vice Chair Padilla might have seconded, and I don't know if he would agree with that friendly amendment, but.
Okay.
So, all right, let's
Joe, you better take over.
Let me try to have some order here. So we have a motion, and we did have Vice Chair Padilla second. So can you please, for clarity, restate your motion, and then we'll have conversation on that motion.
Okay, my motion was to approve the entire document with in 2C, the second paragraph of 2C, the words further encourage replaced by require. Everything else is as the staff has proposed. Now, I don't know if that was my motion, if Mr. Padilla agrees with that or not.
Do you support that? Do you agree with that motion, Vice Chair Padilla?
I would agree with that specific motion to strengthen that to a requirement. I'm not in agreement with the strike from the, I'm not sure, I need a point of clarification if we're trying to strike the skilled and trained workforce from the staff document that's before us, or from the requested language that IBEW submitted that cite to the higher standard.
Okay, that's not in my motion. If you second it, then my understanding is Monica would ask you to change it. That's not the motion I'm making. I was trying to make the super simple motion and I can't seem to get that through.
All right, so it sounds like.
I understand. I can second
okay.
that.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. So let's let's have discussion on this motion.
Okay, now.
Director, go ahead. Director Montgomery Steppe.
Yes. I guess the question becomes now, is the wording in the proposed document that we received in our packet today that says a skilled and trained workforce, does that have the same legal definition as what was proposed in the IBEW language today, or I believe yesterday when we received that? That is the question, because if it does, then it could lead to exclusivity of some apprenticeship programs, some pre-apprenticeship programs, some community college programs.
So
that's
let's
my
go.
question.
Let's go with that question. Let's go to our general counsel. Ryan, question is that when we look at the language that was presented today in the staff packet, it talks about in the second paragraph, it talks about prevailing rate of wages and use a skilled and trained workforce. Is that language the same as the language in the IBEW language where it says, where it talks about skilled and trained workforce and it cites chapters of the California Public Contract Code?
Yes, unless SDCP were to somehow define it differently in the document or some other policy, I would say yes. What IBEW is doing is essentially just citing you to the direct code section specifically, whereas the language here, doesn't have that, specifics. But skilled and trained workforce and prevailing rate of wages are terms of art under the law. So
they're essentially the same.
Correct.
All right. Does that answer your question, Director Montgomery Steppe?
It does, and I would ask that we strike that language as a friendly amendment.
The Monica, is it? I now see the way it's written. It's it has "and" at the end of prevailing wage. Is it, if it said encourage a use of skilled and trained workforce, would that make a difference to you?
Yes, it would.
Mr. Padilla, does that make a difference to you if there's a period after prevailing rate of wages, which is the requirement, and then a new sentence that says SDCP will further encourage the use of a skilled and trained workforce? Does that make a difference to you, Mr. Padilla?
You're a skilled sausage maker, Director, and my hat's off to you, especially when we're doing it from the dais, which I hate. I know we all do, but sometimes you just got to do the hard work. I suspect that, it's not adverse in terms of being construed either way if you loosen the language up. So I would prefer the language that said we require it, but I don't know that your solution would prohibit achieving the same kind of result that labor is looking for, while leaving the flexibility that not to be overly exclusive that Director Montgomery Steppe is looking for. So in that spirit, and with the recognition that this work isn't done, and I think we're going to revisit this language more than tonight, and we can bring it back and we can keep working on it. So for tonight's purposes, I'm happy with that modification. I think it's a good suggestion in terms of moving the process forward.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, one more.
Yeah, are you gonna suggest not that Director Baber's language isn't okay? Are you gonna suggest a smoother language to effectuate the encourage?
Yeah, whatever the board decides, I'm fine with. If the board does is moving to move that up, I would just, as a contract drafting, just move all the encouragement to the first paragraph where it currently is, and then leave all the requirements in the second paragraph. So that we could.
That works too. I understand, but the only requirement is the prevailing wage. Is Ryan? Is that the way you understand what I'm saying?
For purposes of your motion, yes, that's what I understand.
Okay.
All right. So that was
I don't know if it's passed, but let's see if that motion can survive.
Was that a friendly amendment? Is that taken as a friendly amendment, motion maker, Director Baber?
Yes, with Mr. Padilla's concurrence, that is a friendly amendment to Monica Montgomery Steps
All right.
request.
All right, and Vice Chair Padilla accepts.
Accept.
All right. All right, so we have a motion by Director Baber and a second by Vice Chair Padilla. Is staff, Ryan, are you clear on what we're doing?
Absolutely clear. I've been taking copious notes and I'm
All
glad
right.
to write it all out and then send it to the board to make sure it's perfect and crystal clear.
All right. All right, so this is the moment that we're going to vote. Megan?
Yes. Director Montgomery Step,
Yes.
Director Dadina,
Gina, yes.
Director Baber,
Yes.
Vice Chair Padilla,
Yes.
Chair Mosca.
Yes.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
All right, awesome. All right, so we're at the end of our agenda. Do we have any comments by any directors?
Yeah, this is Mayor Dedina.
Yes.
I'm always going to be a pain in the ass pushing us to do more than we think we can and always pushing us to be national leaders in how we do things. So I'm not a very patient person right now because of a lot of the things that are happening. So I apologize if I lost a little bit, but I think we all need to have a sense of urgency about pushing the envelope and discarding the way that we did business in the past. Because like I said, it's brought us to this climate crisis and we're trying to dig ourselves out of it. So that's it. But I apologize for being impatient and especially to you, Chair Mosca. And I promise I will try to be more patient, more diplomatic like my colleague, Steve Padilla. And I
We're
do
the yin and the yang, Mayor.
but I do appreciate the consensus and collaborative nature of this board. It was very impressive. And I do appreciate that. So I will attempt to be less of a bomb thrower and more diplomatic in the future, but I do appreciate all the work you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thank you, and no need to apologize. You're doing awesome.
I don't want to lose the inner surge under any conditions. Okay.
I don't either, for the record. I'm okay. I like to put the dukes up sometimes. It doesn't bother me.
Monica's like, it doesn't bother me if Joe gets beat up. Let him let him take it. All right.
Me, I thought I was fighting.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Any other director comments? All right. Hearing none. What about our CEO or our general counsel?
I don't have any.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right. Well, you guys have an awesome night. We did some good tonight, and I will see you at our next regular meeting for the month of February 25th.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, yeah.